Hi and welcome to Magic Numbers, and this is episode number 106, and we have the skeleton crew back. And because of that, we're going to be talking about the draft skeletons we prepared for the new set, Murders at Karlov Manor. And today, obviously, it's a crew, so we have many guests. First and foremost, JasonILTG, the Slowgurk aficionado turned limited player. Then we have Tajoordan, aka Benji, aka dog sitter of his grandmothers. And Adam that combines streaming and having plastering done in the background for your extra entertainment. All of us are, despite this love of Slowgurk, all of us are actually at heart limited players, and we usually spend those 4 days between the spoiler release and the next weekday mastering and perfecting our draft skeletons, figuring out what we think the format might be all about. And instead of doing a set review where we grade all the cards, we try to look more holistically and we try to figure out what synergies we can think of in the set and build those very simplistic decks that showcase what we think this format might be about. Obviously, we won't get it right every single time, as we proved time and time again. But I think it's still interesting to think about the format from this perspective and try to prepare yourself for the pre-release season, for the first drafts when the set is released on Arena, etc., etc. But before we go into the meat and potatoes, which will be a 2-hour random discussion about cards that we thought are cool, how do we actually build our skeletons? First of all, I wanted to give a big shout out to sealeddeck.tech because they provide an amazing tool for building your sealed and also amazing tool for building those kind of draft skeletons where you can go and just click on the link. You have all the cards from the set. You can build them into a deck, or you can copy your Arena sealed pool and skip the Arena very bad sealed deck builder for this way superior one. And they are super responsive to the community needs and are generally nice people. So we always give them a lovely shout out because they do deserve it quite a lot. Now, our skeletons are supposedly slightly on the realistic side, so we don't want to put 12 mythic bombs and then a couple of uncommons to spice things up. We try to build them mainly from commons, and we actually try not to have more than 2 of each of the common that we put in. Then there's like between 0 and 8 uncommons, most of the time closer to 8 than to 0. And like 0 to 2 rares, so that we end up with something that you could imagine being drafted in the pod realistically when the color is open. And obviously, we can put some basic lands as we want, and we can put non-basics as suitable. Most of the time, we just skip it nowadays, do we? Yeah, so that's how we build a skeleton. But before we go into the skeletons, I think that the most interesting part for many streams in a row has been the actual discussion of the format before we dive into the decks and what we think about the cards. Skeletons are sort of an afterthought by now, but I think that this is also built in such a way that we do focus on the synergies and we do focus on how cards interlock with each other rather than looking at each card in separation like set reviews will normally do. So first big picture part of the set we usually talk about is the removal, and you can't really judge removal without knowing how it aligns with the cards. Now, of course, in a perfect world, I would take these numbers and align the removal with cards that are relevant for the format. But since we don't know yet which cards are going to be relevant, I'm just lining them up with all the cards. And we can look at different types of removal, and murder will kill everything independently of its power and toughness, but a lot of removal is conditional, especially the one that deals damage. And in this set, we actually don't have a 1 damage removal spell. I miss the times of rat out and flick the coin, but those times are long gone. We didn't have a 1 damage removal in LCI. We only had a 1 damage mini sweeper. And we don't have a 1 damage removal here. There is technically, if you have 1 creature and you play Case of the Gateway Express, it will ping something for 1. So that's technically could be a removal for 1 toughness creatures. There's not so many of them. There's 23% of all the common creatures have 1 toughness, around 17% of the uncommon creatures, and only 5% of the rares and mythics have 1 toughness. So probably that's why we don't get that kind of removal. Then there is a 2 damage removal, and this is important category in a set with disguise, because there will be plenty of creatures that on the front side have maybe toughness of 6 or 7 or 4, but it will be played as a disguised creature, and it will be a 2 toughness creature at that stage, albeit with ward 2, which in my opinion at least is a genius move from the design team, because it does open quite a lot of design space that was not available in sets with morph. I did a couple of comparisons, because obviously now if you cast a shock on the new morph version of the creature, you'll have to pay 3 mana, which makes the exchange fair. Your opponent spent 3 mana to cast the disguised creature, you spent 3 mana to cast a shock on it. But because you have a shock in the format, all the other creatures that have 2 toughness are fair game for shock for 1 mana, which means that you can print some 2-drops, unlike in Khans of Tarkir. And I did the math. Khans of Tarkir had 25 1 and 2 drops in the whole set. This one has, or maybe 27 2 drops in the whole set. This one has 45 in total. So that's not far from double the amount of 1 and 2 drops, because you cannot kill the morphs with any kind of spell that would normally target those two toughness creatures. And shock does kill like 54% of all the creatures on their face value, 40% of uncommons, and 30% of rare and mythic creatures. So quite a chunk. And because of this extra utility of being able to kill disguised creatures for 3 mana, so Zergog is asking, how do I account for disguises? I do not account for disguises in the shock statistics on this slide. I will look at some of the statistics for the disguise on the next slide when I look at the another card that can deal with the disguised creature. But still, like 54 and being able to pay 3 mana to kill a disguised creature, which there are some of in the set. I'm pretty sure that shock is going to be decent. Also, you can go face to get that extra couple of damage if you're playing an aggro deck and you just like miss those last 2 damages. So that's shock is being useful for that. Then we have the 3 damage spells, and these cover. There's a lot of them. First of all, there is like 71% of the creatures at common and uncommon are killed by lightning helix or galvanize or case of the burning masks. Which are the spells that can deal 3 damage. And then still 45% of the rare and mythic creatures are also handled by 3 damage spells. Then we have 4 damage spells. There's a couple of those. These cover roughly 85% at all rarities. So then that gap of rare is disappearing dramatically, which means that there is a huge amount of rares that have 4 toughness in this set, basically. Like almost 40% of all the rare and mythic cards, creature cards, have a toughness of 4. So this sort of tells me that 4 toughness is going to be sort of quite an important number when you have to deal with the bombs. You better have something that can deal with that kind of toughness. And lastly, we have 5 damage spells. There's Galvanize that can do that. It does kill 95 plus of commons and uncommons, and 88% of the rare creatures. So that will be close to unconditional removal realistically. But apart from damage removal, we also have some cards that have conditional removal. There is Make Your Move, and this one destroys target artifact, enchantment, or creature with power 4 or greater. And there's 20% of common cards that fulfill either the power 4 or greater or artifact creature criterion. Only 10% of the uncommons, but 25% of rares and mythics are handled with that card. I still think this is going to be a sideboard sort of option for best of 3 rather than something that we are going to main deck. Free mana for this kind of an effect requires something special to happen in the format for it to be good. I mean, we're still going to see. I don't know. Do you have any expectations for this card?
I think I'm with you here, Sirkovitz, in that it's going to be a sideboard special where, like, in best of 3, I would like access to one because it looks like there's going to be a good amount of bombs. But at the same time, like, I really don't want this in my main deck, I don't think.
I mean, it does deal with, like, There's plenty of artifact synergies. There is some cases that are enchantments, so maybe it will turn out that you will occasionally put it in your deck. But I hope not to, at least in the beginning.
Agree.
Then we have like a really good card, I think, in Long Goodbye. That's a 2 mana, can't be countered, so it can kill those ward creatures without paying the ward cost. And it destroys target creature or planeswalker with mana value 3 or less. That kills around half of the creatures at each rarity. But there is also this additional bonus of disguised creatures that have a mana value of over 3 that you can kill while they're disguised when using that spell for 2 mana. And that's a quarter of the creatures actually at common. There's plenty of high-cost disguised creatures because there is a whole cycle in multicolor, and there is a bunch of them at common as well in monocolor. Then that's around 13% of the uncommons, and very few to 2% of the rares that will be also capable of being killed with that spell if you target the disguised bigger creature. And that sort of partially explains or answers the question that Zergok had in the chat. And the last, there is pick your poison, and then you can it's the classic green spell that is always a D somehow in every single set. This time it's 1 mana, but this time it doesn't target, so your opponent has a choice, and you can choose either to each opponent to sacrifice an artifact, each opponent to sacrifice an enchantment, or each opponent to sacrifice a creature with flying. And there seems to be plenty of flying, so I calculated there's going to be roughly a quarter of the creatures that are targeted by it, up to even 35% at rare. I hope I got the numbers right there, because it looks a bit dodgy. But let's say that we believe those numbers, because there's plenty of artifact creatures as well. Yeah, I think that the fact that if your opponent has a clue, you have to force them to sacrifice an artifact. They might choose a clue instead of something more bomby is a problem with that card, as the chat rightfully observed. And there are sweepers in the set, and I think that all of them look pretty excruciatingly painful for you if opponent plays them. There are no like mini sweepers in this set at all. There's nothing that deals 2 to everything, gives -2/-2 to everything. They skip this idea completely. Instead of that, there's 5 relatively bomby mass sweepers, or mass tempo sweeper in one case. First, we have No Witnesses. That's a 4 mana wrath with a potential drawback that the player with the most creatures at the time of casting it can investigate. So they will get a free clue token for trading older board for 1 card, which, it's not nothing, but it's still like, it won't completely quench their sadness of losing probably 4 or 5 creatures for 1 card. Then you have Lost in the Maze. That's a pretty interesting card. It's like blue, and X for an enchantment, but an enchantment with flash. And when it enters the battlefield, you can tap X target creatures, and you put stand counters on each of those creatures that you don't control. But you can also tap your own creatures, because tapped creatures you control have hexproof. So you can cast it in response to a removal spell. Removal spell will fizzle because you tapped one of your creatures, and you can also tap 3 of opponent's creatures. And then obviously, if you are on the offensive, or if you have any effects that allow you to tap creatures at instant speed, your creatures will sort of always get hexproof, which is a nice addition to it. Then we have Deadly Cover-Up. 5 mana, sorcery, 3 black. It's just a wrath, basically. But when you cast it, you can collect Evidence 6, which means you exile cards from your graveyard with mana value, in total mana value of 6 or more. And then you destroy all the creatures, and if you collected evidence, you can exile a card from an opponent's graveyard and then search their graveyard, hand, library for any number of cards with that name and exile them. And that player shuffles, then draws a card for each card that you exile from their hand this way. So it's a small bonus when you think that they might be having a card in multiple copies. I don't know, if you are playing against the opponent that has 6 Slimes Against Humanity and they already cast 2, you wrath the board, you collect evidence, you can exile the remaining slimes against humanities from their deck, and they will feel very sad because they will draw land after land for the rest of the game. Then there is Incinerator of the Guilty, 6 mana for a 6/6 flying trample, and if you don't kill it on the turn, it enters, and they manage to swing once, you lost the game, basically. Because whenever it deals combat damage to a player, you may collect evidence X. When you do, Incinerator of the Guilty deals X damage to each creature and planeswalker, but only to the ones that opponent controls. So yours are safe. It's basically a Plague Wing on the stick, and the stick is a 6/6 flying trampler. That's going to be hard to come back from. I don't understand why this card exists. Fortunately, it's a mythic, so but that could be more atrocious than the Bonehorde Dracosaur, I guess, if it doesn't get killed. It has like probably more profound effect on the game if it gets one turn of surviving. And then last one is Ill-Timed Explosion. 2 blue and a red for a sorcery. You draw 2 cards. Then you may discard 2 cards, and when you do so, Ill-Timed Explosion deals X damage to each creature, where X is the greatest mana value among cards discarded this way. So like a cute wrath that also lets you do some card selection. You draw 2 cards, you can discard a couple of them, and you can discard them at exactly the right sizing that will be the most annoying for your opponent if you have that particular casting cost in your hand. So yeah, pretty cute card, but if you have like a split card, you can just discard the split card and go nuclear and destroy everything if that's your most convenient situation there. I don't know. I think that all of them look pretty good. Okay. Lovely.
I think I like slightly disagree with you on no witnesses. I think the downside is pretty big. Letting your opponent investigate. It's like probably okay, but also white is not the best color for a sweeper in this set, I think.
That might be the biggest problem of that card. I actually looked at the homes and I didn't find one when I was building my my skeletons because I didn't feel comfortable just yet to try to build control decks. I think there might be some fringe one that will happen once every 100 drafts, but I'm not going to play 100 drafts of the format probably, so there is the problem. Okay, this is the creature sizing at common by set. I looked at each set since Midnight Hunt till now, and I think that the interesting parts, there is quite few 3 toughness creatures in the set, and at common at least. It doesn't surprise me that much because you don't want to have like a lot of 2/3s in a set with morphs. So only 17% of the creatures are toughness 3, and normally this number will be closer to something like 23 on average. With some sets having like 30% of the 3 toughness creatures. At the same time, in total, there's quite a lot of 1 and 2s, which is good because this is only enabled because those morph creatures have ward. If we took those numbers for Khans of Tarkir, those 2 numbers of 1 and 2 toughness creatures will be way lower than in this set. So that simple decision on set design has created this kind of possibility. And the other interesting thing, Lost Caverns of Ixalan was the set with the most creatures with 4 and more toughness in the recent years. But this one is pretty close. That's the second most of the 4 and plus toughness creatures we get, with 15% of those. And it means like that there's like 30% at common of things with toughness 4 or more in total, which is, I think, the most of all the sets that we had in the last 2 years. Something to keep in mind. There's plenty of large toughness creatures. Mind you, a lot of them are like 1/4s. Yeah, that covers my removal part. So now maybe we can talk about the mechanics and the big picture about them.
Yeah, sure. I can jump in here, Circo. So yeah, probably the headline mechanic is Disguise. So if you've played with Morph ever and, 25 years ago, 10 years ago, or, 5 weeks ago, you'll probably recognize this as just a variation on Morph. So it's a way to put a creature face down, nameless creature, and then at some point, at faster than instant speed, you can turn it face up. And many of these creatures you'll recognize will have some sort of ability when you turn it face up. So there's 36 of the cards across all the colors. So you're going to see these come down on turn 3 a good number of the time. And to Circo's point about the creatures with 4 or greater toughness, many of them will be disguised creatures. You can put them out, on turn 3, and then eventually turn them face up, on turn 5, 6, 7, what have you. So that's where some of them lie. But also you'll see some of these smaller creatures that are giving you a benefit when they're turned face up. And thankfully, as was mentioned before, a way to try and that the design and development team have made to change to morph for disguise is they're all going to have ward too. So it's a way to feel like you can actually have these creatures, potentially survive, not get targeted with interaction on your opponent's side often, but potentially you may have them being targeted by interaction on your side. So I guess an initial question to the group is how they think tricks and removal, what that interplay might look like in terms of being a little more likely to cast spells into slightly open or open mana on your opponent's turn versus your turn. So just some initial thoughts for how people think that might play out in this set. Like, are you more likely to play tricks than you might otherwise be because you feel like some of your creatures are going to be a little safer? Are you less likely to play removal because your removal might not, be a 2-mana removal that kills a 3-mana card? You might have to pay the ward too, and it becomes mana inefficient. I don't know how people feel about that.
Yeah, I do think that tricks will be better because of this. Putting it on a ward 2 creature is better. And also, I think the bigger thing is because you have more ways to, more ways to play at instant speed that work better with even more ways to play at instant speed, right? So, having the ability to flip a morph up or use a trick is just going to make it a bit harder. It's going to make the squeeze you put on your opponent a bit harder. On the flip side, your opponent might be more likely to hold up mana on your turn because they can use it for a morph. But we'll see exactly what the dynamic there is. But I suspect the tricks. There do look to be some pretty good tricks in this set, I guess.
I tend to agree. There will be a lot of sussing out what your opponent's doing because a lot of open mana, I think, which may favor some colors that just have a density of instant speed interaction in addition to whatever morphs they may have. And then we do have the morph rule, if you will, that's in effect from cons that did not exist way back in, Torment, Judgment, all those, where if you're going to flip a morph up, it's got to be at least until turn 5. So you have to have 5 mana to be able to have your morph eat their morph. So have it, have 2 power and greater than 2 toughness. So that's just helpful when you're thinking about developing your board and what your turn 3 and turn 4 and potentially turn 5 might look like in the developing stages of a game. I think another question, if you look at some of these morphs, you'll see their disguise cost, so what they'll flip up for, is pretty cheap. 2 mana with Exit Specialist, 2 mana with Dog Walker, where some others may be a little prohibitive from double spelling, like this Balrock Clan Basher is 5 mana to disguise to flip up. So I think it'll be interesting gameplay for, or are you going to be trying to double spell on turn 4, turn 5, flip your disguised creature up and play a combat trick or develop the board again versus are you just, going to be waiting to flip up your morph that costs 5, 6, 7 mana to flip up. So I think just try and suss that out when you have open mana, your opponent has open mana will really lead to some interesting gameplay decisions. So I think gameplay will be really good in this set compared to maybe some of our other recent sets. And then we do have a couple disguises that are not creatures. You'll see a land here and then an equipment. I'm not sure how playable the land is or the equipment is, but it's just good to know that these are available and they can kind of fizzle blocks and maybe give you some advantage, get some mana to set up a spell your opponent might not have known about or a trick to try and blow out a bigger block where they were trying to eat your creature. So just good to know that there are almost all creatures, but some will be non-creatures. And then on the next slide, we'll look at kind of the 10 hybrid gold hybrid cards. So the top row are those that, I guess to orient you to the color. So all of them are going to be a gold card for its normal cost. So you'll see 2 AB, but its disguise cost will have 2 mana symbols that allow you to play a hybrid. So like Granite Witness, 2 white, blue, if you want to play it face up, or if you want to disguise it and then flip it over, a hybrid blue, white, blue, white. So I think that's pretty cool because this may allow you to navigate your draft such that you have a lot of these cards that may go into multiple different types of decks or multiple different types of colors potentially, and maybe help you delay a decision a little or get a little extra power, a little extra flexibility in your deck that might otherwise be a little tough to do in the sets that are traditionally, 2 colors, maybe a light splash. I think it'll be kind of neat to get some of these effects you might not otherwise see in a color pair. So I think that'll be cool. And all the ones on the top row are those that you might, flip up and maybe set up a double spell in your developing turns. The first 4 all cost just 2 mana to flip up and have some type of effect when you flip it up. Some of the effects may be a little stronger than others, but it's good to recognize that these may set up double spell turns, whereas those on the bottom row, 4, 5, 6 mana to flip up to disguise. Not saying you can't necessarily double spell with those, but you're probably setting yourself up for having that be something you do on your turn when your opponent's maybe tapped out or end of turn sort of thing. So I'm not sure how these will necessarily play because we'll have to get into the set and see, quote unquote, speed of the format and on all the dynamics. But knowing that there's a ton of creatures that have morph, they could go in a variety of decks that maybe don't resemble the 2 color pips in the top right of the card. Will add for some interesting gameplay and trying to figure out what your opponent might have disguised and what that could look like. So I'm excited for these. I think it's pretty neat design and should add a interest to both draft and gameplay.
Yeah, I'm actually wondering how does the increased mana density of the spells, and by what I mean by that is that
the pips.
Some of those cards you're going to be paying 8 mana to get a 5/5 because you play the disguise creature. You're gonna pay 5 mana to flip it, and that's a lot of extra mana usage for just one card. We don't normally see that kind of amount of mana being spent for spells in a normal set. So how is this extra mana that we're going to be paying for the morph? Let's call them morph creatures, okay?
Yeah.
For the morphs, how is it going to relate to the speed of the format? I think that this might be the format that I don't see a clear path of super aggro decks. I mean, there might be something in Boros. There might be something maybe in Izzet. But the rest of them, they look like you want to play that kind of grindy game. So that might mean the evaluation has to be slightly changed to what we've been playing in the recent year, especially with the fast set of the last year.
Yeah, that's my hope as well. Yeah.
I mean, Very Snoop looks like pretty sweet to me.
I think it's not quite accurate to think of all of these as I'm paying 8 mana for my 5/5, right? Because if you say it that way, right, you kind of have to factor in the fact that the 5/5 is already attacking. You got to spend some mana earlier for a 2/2, which can have flexibility of trading in combat. One way you could think about it, which is kind of weird, but you can think about it you're playing you get to play a 3 mana 2/2 that draws you the card 5 mana, put 3+1/+1 counters on specifically this creature, and it gains when it
but it's still I still spend the 8 mana, and that's the thing that I mainly focus on.
I feel like Jason makes a good point though. A lot of times, if you're playing a disguise or a morph creature, they might be spending 3 mana on their shock, which is typically a 1 mana removal spell, but instead they're investing the 3 mana to trade with it because sometimes that 3 mana 2/2 can apply enough pressure that it demands an answer before the 5 mana, or maybe they just have a hand full of removal and they just need to cast something on curve. And I think there are a lot of situations when you get a reasonable mana trade, especially with the Ward 2 on your disguise creature, which makes the morph just kind of upside almost.
Yeah, I will say I think that the top row, looking at the set and not having played with it, would strike me as stronger. But when we have things like collect evidence that make the bottom row look a little better because you can collect evidence 4 or 6, whatever, with a lot of those cards. You can be in a slower deck where you're playing this early just to trade off, knowing you might have 2 or 3 of these Hellions in your deck, and you're happy to not fall behind because your late game is going to be stronger than theirs. And we know, if you don't spend your mana, you can't bank it. You can't use it later.
Yeah.
So
I'm happy to have some Woolly Loxodons in my deck.
Yeah. So I don't know how it'll play out, but I would venture to say that the top does look stronger. But yeah, without getting in the format, seeing the quote unquote speed of the format and how the decks kind of play, I could see it being very worthwhile to say, yeah, I get a 5/5 haste investigate on turn 5 for like the crocodile, for example.
That's the card. I mean, I made stupid joke about it should be called investigator. And then I just like looked at the card and I thought that's pretty rubbish. But when I started doing the skeletons, I actually think it's pretty good. Like flipping it for 5 mana, which hopefully in my versions of the build will be on turn 4 or something, with a hasty 5/5 that can give me a clue, plus maybe like do some extra effects for flipping morphs. I'm pretty much into it.
Yeah,
it's not going to be forever deck, but I think that in the right deck, it's going to be pretty strong for a common.
There was a question. Oh, sorry, you first, Taj. Or sorry, Jason. Yeah.
You're
both speaking.
To be clear, I do think the top row is generally a lot stronger than the bottom row here. Like the top row to me looks like premium cards, whereas the bottom row looks like killer plus. And some of this is just the weight on things, but I think inherently it isn't going to be that bad to play one of these expensive morphs because yes, you don't get the best rate compared to generally what we've seen, right? You don't want to pay 8 mana for your 5/5 and deal damage to them to investigate card, right? And a 6 mana for that is not great either. But having the buyout of playing a 3 mana 2/2 is not going to be that bad in this set, I think, because there's your opponent's going to be playing a 3 mana 2/2 as well, right? And you're at least going to be able to trade. There aren't really that many 3 mana 3/3s in this set, which would really punish, or 2 mana 2/3s, things like that. So it'll be fine to play a 3 mana 2/2 sometimes and just trade it off, and that's a real upside on your expensive card. And the fact that you get to choose when to flip the morph up or not is also huge, right? You don't have to pay the 5 mana until it's good for you. That's not to say that I think these cards are busted or anything, or these expensive morphs. I think they are playable. I think they're playable, just not amazing.
I think I would have one exception here with Crowd Control Warden, which I think is strictly better to be played for mana and never consider playing it as a disguise creature, because it basically has the same ETB as when you flip it, so it doesn't matter if you flip it or not. It costs the same amount of mana to flip it or not to flip it. You would rather spend turn 3 to play another creature so it gets more bonus on turn 5 rather than playing it as a disguised creature and then flipping it to give counters on itself with one creature fewer played till that stage, basically.
Yeah, I mean, you do give it haste in a way, though, if you flip it on turn 5, but
that's true. But
yeah, but I will probably not be flipping it much. Yeah. Yeah. So I guess the last question that relates to this before we move to the next slide is, will aggro be better because of these slow morphs? I mean, if you're playing a quote unquote slower deck and you have some of these morphs in there, you can extend the game to the later game because you're able to play these earlier to kind of soak up an attack or just gum up the board and make your opponent's attacks less viable. So I don't know. I mean, if there's an aggro deck, it's going to exist, and morphs probably aren't going to stop it too much, but I don't think these are going to make it more likely that aggro exists. Yeah, that's all. Yeah. Next slide. Yeah. So there's a lot of cards that say investigate on there, which for those people who like a smoothing mechanic in limited, like blood or explore, investigate, things like that, it's kind of a blessing because it gives you a chance to say, okay, this is something, there's enough density of that I can build around. It's across all colors, though it is predominantly blue. They are seeded at common and common pretty effectively, and some of the really good ones at rare. So you can, if you want to move towards this, you can probably count on getting enough of a density investigate cards to probably be able to get to the late game and have things to do with your mana, which I think is helpful. I'm not sure if this will mean that the games will go longer because the cards have been designed such that investigate is tacked onto a okay mana cost spell. It makes it worth playing the spell, whereas it might not be worth without the investigate. And you're having some slightly underpowered cards bumping into each other, but you have investigate tagged onto it. I'm not sure, and I'd be curious to get people's opinions, but I will say, as someone who liked sets that had blood and smoothing mechanics, cycling the ring, I'm excited for this, and I think it'll help you keep mana up, do things into turn, improve the gameplay of the set. So I guess there's a question here. It's if we think this is going to affect the length of the game, because people will be able to spend their mana, maybe take it a little slower, try and suss out who's the aggro, who's the control, and kind of figure that all out.
I mean, if I think anything about that, it's not that Investigate itself will make the games last longer. It's Investigate will make you more likely to win those long games. But I think that what will make the format last longer is actually the sort of, I mean, it is a much more aggressive morph set than Cards of Tarkir, but it's still a morph set, so that will be the slowdown factor. And then Investigate on top of it. Now that's going to be just helping you to go through that long game with things to do at all time.
Yeah, but I can see a deck, if you know your deck has like 8 cards that say Investigate, and you're kind of like a mid-range, you may try and lean towards the more slower controlling side of the mid-range. If you think your card density and card quality and velocity are all going to be better than your opponents, potentially. I don't know. Sorry, Jason or Taj, I think you were saying something.
Yeah, I think one of the big things about having a lot of clues lying around is you actually kind of want your cards to be a bit cheaper, so that you can like effectively like play something, crack a clue, play something, crack a clue. It's going to play a bit worse if you're like all your cards are really expensive. Though, like, you know, Disguise helps that because a lot of your expensive cards you'll be able to like spend 3 mana, play it face down, and then like use that to like double, not spell, but like, you know, you use your mana in multiple ways, playing it and cracking a clue.
I'm excited. It feels like it's going to have a puzzle every turn. Like, how do I best optimize my mana, but realize what is my opponent doing, and do I need to be mana suboptimal to get a bigger threat or like push an attack or something? So I think it'll be, again, I think this will be really good gameplay in this set, and hopefully pretty good to good draft as well.
Until they dump a 6/6 dragon.
Yeah, and then hopefully you held onto your removal spell that you didn't play on the ward 2 creature because you couldn't.
That's I think that's I think one thing that the colors that have the most Investigate don't have the most of the unconditional removal. I think white is sort of an exception there, because white has pretty good unconditional removal and some clues, but black has very little Investigate, if I remember correctly.
It feels like there's a lot of removal in black and just, you know, removal in general in the set. However, when it comes to, you know, 6 toughness or unconditional, like the list gets a lot smaller, as we saw.
Yeah. There's the Oblivion rings. There is the Selesnya Oblivion ring, which looks pretty sweet. And then there's Murder. And I think that's, you know, like these are going to be... Oh, and probably there is the black thing that you can gather evidence, collect evidence.
You can turn it into Assassin with your blue-black uncommon, too.
Yep.
Oh, yeah, that's true. That's actually a cool one. Death Toucher. You just need to discard a card that costs, collect evidence 1, and it kills everything.
Yeah.
Oh, I didn't even realize that. That's awesome.
That we will realize that within the first week, I think, and be upset. Yeah. So this is Investigate. Yeah. For those who played with it, you'll probably recognize.
Oh yeah, no, you didn't mention. I think that there are 2 mechanics that sort of are peppered around in the set that will play well with it. That one of them. If you drew 2 cards this turn, something happens, and the other one is when you sacrifice an artifact, something happens. And I think that both of those mechanics are going to probably be the most beneficial in Izzet decks, because they seem to benefit from the same thing exactly. So by cracking Clue does both of the things, and if you can put the cards that have those mechanics, you will get extra bonuses in your Izzet decks, I guess. Yeah,
that is a good point. Also, unless I missed it, I didn't see any treasures or any other like artifact tokens other than like the 1/1 Thopters, I think. Yeah. There is food. There's a little bit of food in the Thopters, but there's not.
And Thopters are actually great for that sacrifice artifact. Correct. Because you get the guy that makes Thopters and then sacrifices them every turn. So
that one's gonna be a good one.
And it's a 2/3, so blocks the morphs.
Yeah. Because you want to put that in combat all the time. So Suspect, I don't have too much to say. I'm a little hesitant about Suspect. It's in Rakdos.
You think it's a bit sus?
I do think it's a bit sus.
You beat me to it.
Yeah, my colors that are probably not quite aggro enough are going to take away their ability to block, and just hope they can be, you know, all gas, no break. Makes me a little wary. So I don't know, TBD on that. I don't know if people have other more intelligent thoughts than mine on that, but I'll probably have to be proven. Someone will have to show me a heavy Suspect deck that runs me over with Menace, and I can't do anything to to feel like, okay, I want to have a density of this versus just kind of peppered in here and there.
If I was building the suspect deck, I would probably just suspect opponent's creatures, because I think that them not being able to block is better than my creatures getting menace. That's the only thing.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, you're not blocking either way.
Unless you have something like the Runebrand Juggler, and then you just suspect your 1/1s and just shoot them to kill big things, but that's a different story.
Yes. I will say one card. Oh, yeah, sorry, Jason, you first, and then I did want to...
Oh, no. I was just going to say, like, the big thing about suspect is, like, you want suspect... You just always want more suspect in the game if you're trying to be aggressive and race them, and you always want less suspect in the game if you're trying to block. That's just always true, because like your stuff getting menace and not being able to block, or their stuff getting menace and not being able to block, are both aggressive actions.
Yeah, exactly. I heard like lots of comments that suspect you can use it either on your creature or on their creature, but you basically do it for the same purpose. It's to push more damage, so you have to be super aggressive when you do
either they need 2 blockers or they lose a blocker. Like, it literally is kind of the same action.
You have combat tricks, put menace on your stuff, make them block with 2 things.
Or they need a 1 blue instant uncommon that says nothing else is suspected and all your creatures get -2/-0, and then you just
womp womp
scoop the game, I think, there.
We found the big Startle fan.
Yeah, well, this is Super Startle, I think. This is Scared Witless.
It actually looks like a pretty good card.
Oh, the card's going to be ridiculous.
I mean, I put it in a skeleton. I think it'll be fine.
Yeah.
It's nice that it gets around ward with the all creatures kind of.
Yep. Yeah. So, yeah, Suspect seems kind of sus.
I mean, Person of Interest looks great.
Yeah.
3 colors.
2 bodies.
3 colors of permanence for my colorless case.
Oh, yeah. We will see if that makes it into a deck show or not. I wasn't smart enough to put it in one of mine, but maybe somebody else did. So we have Collect Evidence, which is another attempt on using the graveyard as a resource that hopefully won't end up being broken. This one, quote unquote, I'm going to say this one probably is not going to be as wild as Dredge. Going out on a limb there. Yeah.
You mean Delve?
Or Delve, or any of those things that are just ridiculous that use your graveyard.
I think this clearly is
it's not going to be good as Dredge? Come on.
Yeah.
Everything's better than Dredge.
Yeah, so the 22 cards, this is not as seeded as Disguise or Investigate, but it's still present, predominantly in Sultai. And you'll see oftentimes you're looking at a below rate or kind of at rate creature or effect if evidence is not collected, but if you can collect evidence, it's probably worth doing, depending on how many cards that collect evidence are in your deck, and if they're a repeatable effect like the Hedge Whisperer or the Evidence Examiner versus just one-time effects. So there is some mill, there's land cycling, there's split cards, and just playing the game of Magic that can get cards in your graveyard that you can collect evidence with. So I think this will happen. It might somewhat resemble Descend in terms of this will occur, but you're probably not going to turn it on, have it available at your fingertips on turn 3, turn 4 necessarily. But as the game goes on, you can pick and choose the times where you may want to collect evidence and get a beneficial effect from that. So I'm not sure, and maybe it's a question for the group, to what extent you want to say, how many collect evidence cards do I want versus building a collect evidence deck versus, I want, a couple of these, kind of like you would with Escape, thank you. Yeah. But you're I want to make sure I can do this because it'll give me something to do in the late game. I'll have this resource that I otherwise wouldn't be able to use in the graveyard, but I'm not necessarily going to warp my draft or warp my deck building around this mechanic. Like you might have with Descend, for example.
Yeah. So unlike Escape, this is not. So the reason why you wanted just a couple 2 or 3 escape cards in an escape deck is because once you have one escape card, you can just keep escaping the same card. You don't need to. You don't need another one to eat your graveyard, right? Mm-hmm. This is different from that. I don't think you're going to worry too much about overloading on collect evidence cards unless you have a ton. But because each collect evidence card will realistically the collect evidence 6. How much is that? That's between 1 and 3 cards, right? You're gonna be able to feel that pretty decently as the game goes on, and not all. You don't need to power all of them either, right? Extract a Confession, for example, is 2 mana. edict, make them sack a creature. If you collected evidence, you make them sack their biggest creature. Sometimes it doesn't matter that, like maybe they only have one creature or all their creatures are the same size. You don't need to collect evidence then.
Or you cast it on turn 2.
Yep.
Sorry?
Or you cast it on turn 2 and use it to collect other evidence with.
Yeah. The more you have of it, the less you need to collect.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You don't need to collect evidence on every single one of these. Another thing I want to say is the question of like, are these adequate payoffs? There's also another mechanic in the set. Well, not a new mechanic, but like a synergy like package, which is black-green cares about creature cards leaving your graveyard. And this is one way to make creature cards leave your graveyard. So Sultai is a natural, like, broader synergy, like, place for all of this. Like, lots of overlap there.
Yeah, you will make a lot of plans, basically.
Yeah. Or detectives and clues.
Detectives,
I don't know. The detective card looks pretty weaker than the black green one, but these are the two
Really?
things.
We'll have to look at a deck show. Somebody probably has it in a deck show.
You don't like tutus?
Yeah.
They trade with more.
It's extremely strong. The thing about the chalk outline is it fuels your future activations because it gives you clues, right? And like you can use those clues to find more ways to like fuel it.
Yeah, and there's cute cards that go together with it that you can exile from your graveyard. There is the card that returns creatures from your graveyard to your hand, so you can replay them and it's going to be like a grind fest. It's just like maybe we have finally a set where this kind of strategy is going to be not killed by super fast deck within the first 6 turns, so that you actually can start doing some of this planned shenanigans. And I'm looking forward if that's going to be working.
Yeah. I'm hopeful. I think red-white could hum and just be very good, but hopefully it's not quite good enough to not let Sultai kind of do shenanigans. So I don't know. We'll see.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Shall I move?
Yep. Yeah. So I think we can talk about cases now. Jason, I know you have a cases deck. I don't know if you want to save kind of the bigger discussion when we have like a deck shell in front of us.
Yeah, this sounds insane to me. Good luck, y'all.
Yeah, I mean, okay, so to be clear, the cases deck that I have is not like, it's not like, you get literally all the cases because like this slide says, all the cases are good cards, basically. Like all of them look pretty good. At least the uncommon ones. There's 12 total, one of each color at rare, one of each color at uncommon, plus a colorless uncommon and an extra white uncommon. White has 2 cases. White also has a card that pays you off for cases at uncommon, which is the linchpin of the deck that I have. But they're just good cards. I think probably the most questionable one of them is the green uncommon one. But for example, like the red one is just insane. It's 3 mana, deal 3, and then like to solve it, you need 3 sources of damage, which could just be that dealing 3 plus attacking with 2 other creatures. And then once you've solved it, it's just an impulse. You get to stack it, exile top 3 cards, choose one of them to play this turn. Yeah, all of them just provide you value like that. And to be clear, how they work is they do something at the top, often an ETB effect. Sometimes it's a static effect. But all the uncommons, I think, are ETBs. No. One of them goes static. But anyways, then the second box is the condition you need to solve it, and it checks on your end step. So on your end step, if you meet that condition, you'll solve the case. So it doesn't matter if you've solved the case. If you've met the condition before your end step, you have to still be meeting it at your end. So for example, case of the Filched Falcon, to solve you need 3 artifacts. So don't crack your 3rd clue before your end step. And then once you solve it, you'll gain access to the last ability. So those vary in what they do, but generally, a lot of these cases will be mediocre at the top, like a mediocre effect at the top. Still decent, still worth a card, but you're generally not that efficient. Things like investigate for 1 mana or 3 mana deal 3, right? And then some condition to solve, and then if you get the whole thing, it's really good. But the question is just how easy is this case to solve? And some of them very easy. Dealing 3 damage, dealing 3 different sources of damage, Turns out that's pretty easy. Some of them a bit harder. Like the colorless one is control all 5 colors among permanents. And remember that lands are colorless, so you can't just have 5 colors of lands. So that one is spicier, though. There's an easy way to solve that one, which I will be going over later. But yeah.
Please don't tell me you put the ley
I'm
line.
excited to hear about this one.
Not ley line. It's not ley line.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
It's even more sus than that. That'll be your hint. See
Just
if you can
Niv Mizzet. The easy Niv Mizzet.
No, to be clear, that was wordplay.
Yeah. So many of these are going to be playable to very playable, and yeah, we'll see how they actually play out. But yeah, I don't think you're going to be main decking the white card we talked about earlier that destroys enchantments for these, because you would have already gotten some effect. And yeah, I think you just want to try and play to the board and try and keep them from solving the case if you can, or have a game plan if you don't think that you can stop them from doing that.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I think
these
one
are
thing is that
things you want to remove with enchantment removal. Like
they've already gotten some effect.
They're mostly ETBs, so not great.
Yeah.
One thing is that be wary of weird suicide attacks if opponent plays black.
Yeah, giving them a 4/4 is not great.
No, not
for lightning death touch.
Yeah. So there's a good amount of fixing in the set. This is the non-land fixing. We'll look at the lands on the back, but the density of it is in green. Though there is the case of the Shatter Pack that was mentioned, and then there's our revamped Mana Worker, the 1/3.
Woo! Salvage Mana Worker, my baby.
Yeah. Not even at home. This one's better. Even as types for Golem, if you're playing in Cube and you have a precursor Golem and things happen. But back to this set. So yeah, a lot of green fixing. A good amount of it actually looks playable, and enough of it is that common to where you should be able to get a density of what you're looking for if you do want to try and kind of splash around and do some 4 or 5 color kind of stuff, which I think is encouraging, because if the set's not going to be blistering in pace, you might have the time to flip over a 2/2 on turn 4 to get a land, or cycle a Panther on turn 2 and feel okay not affecting the board. So I think it's kind of exciting that these exist to maybe allow splash, but I don't think it's quite to the extent where it's going to be like a Dominaria United, where you're just saying, I'm just going to play 4 or 5 color, 60% of the time, because why shouldn't I, sort of thing. That may not be the case. We may play 5 color a lot in the set, but I think there's stuff here to allow you to do multicolor, and it's probably enough to get into some fun.
Yeah, I do like the Nervous Gardener. It has just the right cost, it seems to me. Like the 1 green to flip it is just excellent. It doesn't change anything power toughness, but it gives you some synergies. You have it's not fixing, but there is the ramping mana dork, the mole that gets bigger as you play your disguise creatures. Mm-hmm. So this with Nervous Gardener, I think, is a nice package of getting to large mana very quickly, and get like a 2/2 or a 3/3 at the end of it, which is great for a 2 mana dork.
Yeah,
Am I right, Jason? Am I right?
I mean, I like Nervous Gardener a lot too. I just wanted to say one of the great parts of that card, which is maybe a bit subtle, is you can just play it as a 2 mana 2/2, right? If you don't need the value, just 2 mana 2/2. Good buyout on your 4 mana Civic Wayfinder.
I prefer turn 2 Mole, turn 3 Gardeners, instantly flip it, get a land, and move on with your life. But I mean, don't underestimate playing it as a 2 mana 2/2. There's not so many of those in the set, so I mean, it's actually a pretty great value creature for that reason only. And you got things like Buried in the Garden, which is just amazing.
But it's nice to get your interaction, on your fixing, which is
Topiary Panther, which is great for collect evidence, because you can cycle it for 2 and you got a 6 collect evidence in your graveyard, just like that.
I think most of these will be playable to very playable. They'll be kind of deceptive in the glue, the way they kind of hold some stuff together.
Don't put Leyline in your deck. You don't have
I'm going to put Leyline in my deck.
You can draft it in paper and probably sell it to someone, but
I'm sure I will.
Yeah.
I won't sell it. I will just pretend that I can sell it. And
Pack one, pick one at the PT. Leyline of the Guild Pact.
I will watch the draft. I'll be curious to see where that goes.
Yeah. Pick 2 Niv Mizzet. And then
game.
just go for the 2-color creatures.
Yeah.
Okay, shall we move on from the...
Yeah. So we have... and then we have lands. I have these... I'm not sure about Public Thoroughfare versus Scene of the Crime in terms of being like the second best land, but I feel like Escape Tunnel is going to be great. And then the rare lands, I think someone... Was it you, Circo, or someone else was saying these are seeded in the land slot, so we should see these more frequently, and they're not going to eat up a rare.
I believe they're in the wild card spot.
Or wild card spot,
thank you. Part, the wild card spot.
So you will get always an extra rare in the pack with those lands. And,
okay, that's awesome.
They're never taking up the rare spot.
Okay.
1 in every 6 packs. So if you go to the pre-release, you should be having 1.
Yeah, nice, cool. So that's encouraging. I think it'll help with 2-color and a light splash or 4 or 5 color craziness. I don't know. I mean, this is probably going to be, if we can limit this like a minute or two, I'd be curious to your discussion on like Public Thoroughfare versus Scene of the Crime and what we think you might be more happy to have one of in your deck.
So my take is Public Thoroughfare by quite a bit, because I think there's a big difference. Looking at the Scene of the Crime ability, right? Like it looks kind of like a you're using like a Springleaf Drum or Despair Sentinel, and those effects have been playable and like quite good in the past, right? But there's a big difference between like tapping a creature to ramp and tapping a creature just to like fix your mana. And it's really bad tempo-wise if you have to keep tapping your creature to make colored mana. So mostly, if I'm playing Scene of the Crime, mostly I want to treat it as a tapped colorless land that I'm playing because it's a clue. Right, and like that can be worth something. That can also be really dangerous because your opponent can play turn 3 orangutan, kill your lands. Good luck.
Yeah, you just scoop there, I think. Yeah.
Yeah. Or you play turn 1 Scene of the Crime. Your opponent goes turn 1 Forest, pick your poison, and sack your land. So
I don't know. I still might win that match because they're playing Pick Your Poison, but
some caution advised. But certainly, I don't think you should be looking at Scene of the Crime as fixing. I think you should be looking at it as like a land that like kind of serves as a mana source, but mostly serves as card draw. And Public Thoroughfare is actually fixing.
I think that's a good point because like Scene of the Crime doesn't actually cast the first creature that allows it to fix. It's just a colorless land.
Yeah, and you can imagine Public Thoroughfare turn 2, turn 3, you play Morph and you start your game basically. That's only you have like a lot of mana available at that time. Branch of Vitu-Ghazi, do we play one as a 17th land in an aggro creature deck? Do you have an extra disguise stuff?
Maybe, but no. I think Branch of Vitu-Ghazi seems pretty bad to me. Colorless land is always a bigger cost than you think it is. Another thing...
Well, that's why I said 17 lands in the deck that you are just on the border of playing 16 or 17, and you put one of those, sometimes you play it as a creature. That's it. That's just it.
So
that's how I see it.
A big thing about this is, for one thing, you probably want 17 lands more than 16 anyways, because like there's more mana sinks with disguise and with clues. And another thing is the common hybrid disguise creatures. If you're like playing it like as half the color, right? You're playing the blue-red one in your white-red deck. You're gonna need red-red for that. This is not gonna. This colorless land is gonna punish you quite a lot. And if you don't really want to flip it, it's not great. So
yeah, if you were like a monocolored aggro deck, I could totally see this. Yes. But a lot of times when you're like valuing like 16 or 17 lands in your aggro deck, it's like color sources more than like mana sources as a whole. And this doesn't get you to like 9 of your main color. So
I mean, it totally does once. If you need it.
Yeah. I don't think does anybody have a monocolor deck in their deck shelves, first of all? I'm just curious.
I don't think that there will be monocolor decks in this format.
I don't think there will either, but I mean, looking at the hybrid morphs.
Yeah, maybe with the hybrid morphs.
I could see if you're just in a pod that let's just say that white is, one of the top 2 colors. It might or might not be, but let's say it is. And you're really happy with the white disguise cards and you get like 7 of them. Like I could see someone being like, I have 23 quote unquote white cards or 24 and I'm just going to ship it
So sort of like the Thrones of Eldraine, the 4 hybrid mana uncommons, when you could load on 4 of those and just play, put some artifacts. But in that set, you had a lot of artifacts.
Right. We don't really have artifacts that I want to play. Maybe the mana worker, maybe, but.
Yeah, I don't think monocolor is going to be a thing. If it is a thing, it's most likely going to be white, because like white has like good aggressive monocolor stuff and very cohesive there, as we'll see coming up. But no artifacts compared to Eldraine, and also like the hybrid cards are not like really powerful cards that are like hard to cast if you're not monocolor. They're just like normal cards. So there's like not much.
And a bunch of them are synergistic with the theme of the actual color pair, so they might not be as good off the color pair as they will be in the color pair.
And then flip side, I think I didn't play Cons when it originally came out, but when I replayed it, I found myself in 18 land decks a reasonable percent of the time. I don't think this will be an 18 land format, if you will, but I could see that maybe being right in some decks. I don't know if people are just like, no, I'm probably never going to do that, versus all the morphs and might be doing some splish splash. I want to make sure I'm using my mana. I don't want to miss land drops till turn 5. If you think that'll be something you consider in the early days.
I think it'll be different, because I was playing a lot of 19 land 5-color decks, and I don't see myself doing that. But I don't know. I was looking a lot, and like it looks like you can do some pretty linear 2-color decks. So I'll probably be trying to do that at least early on in the format, because that's kind of my baseline.
Yeah, Cons had, I think, much better fixing as well. Which
I'll be a 2-color Andy also, I think, but I know that that's only one way to play. So.
Well, you already know my answer for how many colors I'm like.
Yep.
5. Mm-hmm. But not 3.
Pack one, pick one, line of the Guild Pact. Let's go.
But yeah, this is the very important 5, but not 3. I don't think that there's a 3-color option in this set, but there's definitely a 5-color option. So you want to fix.
I think that's probably true. Yeah. Okay.
All right.
You want to take over, Jason? White.
Yeah. So, like I said, I think white will be one of the most synergistic colors in this format, or like the easiest synergy package at common, because all of it points at the same thing: going wide, being aggressive. Basically, everything points at this. You have so the headline of this, in my opinion, is on the job. This is 2/8 instant for a inspired charge. Basically, creatures you control get +2/+1 plus you investigate. So like we've been seeing upsides on inspired charges, like in DMU, the upside was you could pay 1 in a red kicker in order to also give creatures trample, which was pretty good. But paying 2 mana afterwards to crack your clue is actually quite good as well. Because like, you know, you might joke like, oh, I'm going to crack my clue after I kill them with my my inspired charge, right? But sometimes you just want to use inspired charge just to get some good trades, right? Like sometimes you want to cast 2 inspired charges. The first one makes them really sad, and the second one actually kills them. And in that case, you actually do quite appreciate the clue. So I think this is going to be a very powerful card, and there's a lot of support for it as well. I think the biggest thing here is Dogwalker. That's the red-white hybrid common disguise. It's a 3/1 vigilance, so you could play it for red-white just for 2 mana as a 3/1 vigilance, which isn't bad, especially like not that many 2-drops in the set. Or you could play it face down for 3 and then flip it up for 2 mana hybrid, and make 2 tapped 1/1s. That's a lot of power and toughness split across bodies. 5 mana in installments, which is very nice for a 3/1 and 2 1/1s. That's just good rate, and that's going to help you a lot with going wide and being aggressive. Then of course, you know, things like New Thraben Inspector or like Inside Source has a 3 mana 1/1 that comes with a 2/2. There's going to be plenty of ways to go wide at common and at uncommon. There's a couple more payoffs at uncommon for going wide. Obviously, there's the attack with 3 or more creatures thing that you know requires you to have 3 or more creatures, but also things like Case of the Gateway Express or the Karlov Watchdog that are going to provide you value for like going wide, pump your creatures. And there's also plenty of good ways to push damage in white with some good 2-drops. There's like the 2-mana 2/2 that gets flying when you play a small creature. That's just going to be a 2-mana 2/2 flying a lot of the time for most of the game and push a lot of damage. And good interaction with like Makeshift Binding being one of the best removal spells in white we've seen in a long time. Just an O-ring at common that gains 2 life as well. And a great combat trick, Auspicious Arrival, 2-mana +2/+2, make a clue. So very similar to Complete Devotion from All Will Be One, for example. Those are just going to help a lot with pushing damage. And yeah, white is just aggressive, go wide. Not much else to say. A lot of it is just pointing in that direction. Very synergistic.
Okay, so blue.
Yeah, blue is a bit less, certainly less synergistic, but I think like has a bit more synergy than a lot of the other colors at common. I chose to call it like Flash Tempo because specifically I really like the card Out Cold. This is 3 and a blue for instant, can't be countered, so don't need to pay more for those disguises mostly. And you get to tap and stun 2 creatures and investigate. That's really good rate, right? You get 4 different instances of a creature being tapped for 4 mana, and you get to investigate. Card neutral, sign me up.
What was the huge... 3 mana card? The Chill something?
Yeah, Chill of the Grave or something from Midnight Hunt.
Yeah, exactly.
This is like that card, but like twice, you know?
Yeah, for 1 extra mana, and you have to spend some mana to draw a card. But still, I mean, it looks really great.
Yeah.
And, you know, like adding a bit of this tempo package to the white aggressive package seems like pretty decent plan on its own. Blue doesn't have to provide any creature, just need to bounce, tap. That's it.
Yeah. On top of that,
tap the creatures. My turn. Play the +2/+1, and you're good.
Yeah. Blue also has a lot of instant speed stuff with like a lot of 2-mana instants at common, like 3 different 2-mana instants, and also just Disguise provides another instant speed thing to do, right? Like instead of you could hold up a counter spell or flipping up your Disguise creature. Like for example, Fairy Snoop is perfect for this. And also blue just has a lot of flyers, like a couple Disguise flyers, the Cold Case Cracker, a couple more flyers as well, like common and uncommon. So all of this like plays more into like the tempo angle, and like, you know, clues also help with the like instant speed thing, right? Holding up, cracking a clue or countering your spell.
Like a card like Reasonable Doubt, I think that it's so much better to suspect ability in blue when you have attacking flyers and you can make the only thing that can block those flyers into a suspect. That's just so much better than when you're attacking on the ground.
Yeah, though I am skeptical of the card Reasonable Doubt just because like the flip side also applies to it, where like, yeah, you have lots of ways to spend your mana instant speed, but your opponent probably also does, right? Like it feels pretty bad to have a Reasonable Doubt while your opponent has a clue, because they can just like play something with a plan of cracking their clue as well, and like you can't counter it because they could just pay the 2 mana they're going to put into the clue, and then you can't counter them cracking a clue. So
maybe they'll crack the clue to draw something to play, and then
yeah, you got to draw your card before you make your decisions, right?
That's true. Okay, black, and that's the most telling slide that we have here. I mean, I have some ideas because
good removal.
Black has cards. Yeah, there we go.
I'm thinking of a black like a perfect attrition package. There's so many ETBs in that color as well on the creatures that are not are somehow not put in many things here. But you know, black-white can easily be this like, I'm playing small creatures, but I attrition you. I have this unscrupulous agents that can sacrifice for some value. For example, to Undercity Eliminator on turn 5 and kill something with it. Then I can extract Confession with stuff in my graveyard, or get them back and recoup all the ETBs. I think that there is something in there. It's just, I don't know if it's not too mid-rangey for this format, because it's neither fast nor super powerful at the late game.
Yeah, to be clear, I'm when I put a bunch of question marks on this slide, I wasn't saying that I think black is a bad color. I just think there isn't anything. It doesn't have
a character,
Yeah, right? Like it has some individually powerful cards. Like I think Toxin Analysis is amazing, for example. 1 mana Death Touch Lifelink Investigate, amazing.
That looks great, yeah.
Completely agree. Card looks
well
amazing.
But yeah, we have no idea of the exact role of the black in this format so far. I guess that means it's going to be a support color for whatever the other color wants to be doing. Which makes me think that I don't like the biggest problem in the skeleton building that I had was Dimir. I didn't really know what it wants to do.
Yeah.
All right, red.
Red, I think so. Red and green, I think, are both kind of support colors. Like red has some very individually powerful cards, notably the removal, like Galvanize and Shock, both look very good in this set. And then it just has a bunch of like, it doesn't have too much cohesion itself, but it has a lot of like cards that like support for other colors. Things like Person of Interest being like a go wide thing for white decks, maybe also a suspect thing for black decks, not sure. Demand Answers being like something that you might want in blue-red, like with the Artifact Sack package. Goblin Maskmaker and pulling more work in red-green, where you're going to want a lot of disguises and like a lot of also you'll want to generate plenty of mana because you're probably going to want some expensive disguises as well. And then like something like Rubble Belt Braggart might be good in red-black. Like a 5/5 Menace is pretty decent if you're like just removing a bunch of creatures. So yeah, I don't know. There's a lot of things in red that like play well with the other colors and like are strong cards, but don't like point at anything necessarily specifically red.
I think that there's like if there is like an easy color pair with red, that's gonna be red blue. I think that there's plenty of synergy with the sacrificing artifacts and apart from Demand Answers, you also have this 5 mana clunky spell that actually, when you sacrifice an artifact, becomes quite decently priced. The deal 4 damage spell. That's, I think, perfectly serviceable in red-blue, but I don't think it's going to be amazing in any other combination unless you get like some really weird version of the deck.
Yeah,
I could see red-white also.
Yeah.
I can see red white. Yeah, red white, but mainly driven by white's good creatures.
Yeah. This will be support to clear the way for white to keep
and the dog is good. And the dog is good.
And the dog looks good. Yeah.
I will say I do like red green a lot based on some practice drafts I did. I at some point did a practice draft with just myself where I sat in all 8 seats, and the winner of that practice draft was the red green deck. So I have been impressed by red green, but
did you have the Quake mole?
I did not have the Quake mole. No, I did not have Anzrag, the Quake mole.
Green,
like I said, I think it's very similar to red. It, like has a bit of stuff itself, but also like mostly plays support for other colors. Specifically, one thing that green has going for it though is fixing, which is very all of like we saw in that fixing slide. A lot of the fixing is concentrating in green. Like every fixing card was like that slide was very green, and there's a lot of different ways in green to fix, and a lot of pretty playable ways as well. But beyond that, it doesn't have like too much of an identity itself. Like it has a lot of cards that like go in different directions. Things like Fanatical Strength, right? This kind of what was called last set? Staggering Size effect, right? Yeah, +3/+3 Trample Trick. That's going to be better in like an aggressive like stompy deck, like in red green, or something like the Tunnel Mole that wants you to play a lot of disguises. Probably goes better in red green. I assume that's going to be like where you have more disguises. Then like something like Vitu-Ghazi Inspector is probably going to go better in a defensive deck, like as a 1/3 reach that's maybe a 2/4 reach that gains some life. And it lacks evidence, so like that fits into the blue-green stuff. Or like Rubble Belt Maverick, which is, I think, an individually very strong card in this set, but also plays very well with the black-green like creatures leaving your graveyard stuff. So like a lot of different support pieces for various archetypes. Nothing too like cohesive in green itself other than the fixing though, which you could argue is naturally not cohesive.
Yeah, I think that's a very good assessment. I do love the Rubble Belt Maverick. I think not only is a self-contained sort of synergy piece that can leave graveyard, but also can put stuff in the graveyard as you please. So that's pretty useful. All right. Are we ready for the main part? Our skeletons. So as always, someone has to start. Who is going to be the person that wants to be the first to showcase their skeleton archetype? And Azorius.
It don't matter. I can take a look at like Azorius or Dimir or something like that. I felt like those were, kind of straightforward.
Wow, you thought that Dimir? Wait, if you thought the Dimir was straightforward, I'm gonna give you the Dimir.
Yeah, I can do Azorius. That's fine. If you want to do Dimir, Taj.
Yeah.
Jason, do you want to talk about your detectives?
Yeah, I didn't do super detective synergy. I just did some of it. So, Jason, we may be a little different in our builds.
My detective deck might be a bit sus, but that's fine.
Let's just start with it.
I need
As any good detective deck is.
Yeah, you got to keep them guessing.
Perhaps, yeah.
I need to do some shuffling the screens, but okay, that's the one. There we have your detective deck.
My main problem with blue-white is that there aren't very many good cheap creatures, right? You ideally want to be an aggressive deck, and you ideally want to curve out like private eye, etc. Point you that way, but like there just aren't a density of good like detective 2-drops at common, for example. So like those are going to be premium. Like you're going to need to pick up like the novice inspectors and the market watch phantoms quite highly. But the rest of the deck is pretty reasonable. Like you can have a bit of a like a skies theme as well. And like private eye might not look like, it doesn't have flying itself, but it does give your flyers +1/+1, and also it makes it so that you can like get in more unblockable damage whenever you crack a clue, and that's going to be pretty important. Things like Granite Witness are going to help with like pushing damage and like swinging tempo. You don't really want to play it for 4, but like sometimes you will. And things like Crime Stopper Spread are also going to be pretty good for that, like just having a Frost Trickster kind of effect. Tapping and stunning something on a Winddrake is going to be nice. And I think this is hard to get the 6.
It's going to be hard to get the 6 mana value into your graveyard. I guess that's the only.
Yeah, maybe like things might trade off, but like worst case it's a Winddrake, which isn't great, but. This deck might also want more inside sources than I currently have, because inside source is admittedly very good with a flyer, like the ability at least. Well, I say very good. It is very expensive still, but to use the ability.
Yeah.
I think what you do really want to be going skies a bit. And I think this will be one of the best homes for reasonable doubt. Also, like you said before, like countering something and giving one of your flyers menace, so it's like really, really hard to block, is nice.
Again, making their flyer not able to block at all, or the reach creature that they have. It looks basically just like mine. So that's
I have a similar build.
Encouraging.
Yeah. I have slightly different gold cards or hybrid cards, but I'm pretty similar. I was trying to look at my turn 4 is flip one of the morphs and then hold up interaction. You have to hold up a reasonable doubt, hold up a bounce spell, a counter spell, whatever it is. And then, I think you can race if you're putting little people on the ground to just chump block and doing your out colds or your whatever the really good uncommon is, eliminate the impossible. Yeah, just doing that to set up big tempo swings so that you can just fly over. It's a possible way to make this work.
So what do you think of this particular card? Projector Inspector.
It's very powerful if you get like 3 triggers off of it, I think. And I think it's not that hard.
Your mana curve ends at 4, so you can basically 5 lands you can operate happily on. The rest you can just But that's unfortunately, it doesn't have any evasion, so it looks slightly odd when you don't have when you have most of your damage being done in the air.
Yeah, I mean, like, trading on the ground isn't terrible either. But yeah, one thing I want to answer that, Seasoned Consultant as a reasonable too, I don't think so, because naturally evasive decks are not going to have, like, 3 creatures attacking nearly as often, right? Like, you need to attack with your Seasoned Consultant and also 2 other things, and then your Seasoned Consultant can probably just be blocked, because your other 2 things are flyers. You have a 3/3 on the ground. It's not going to be amazing. And it just doesn't attack for enough before you get there, right? Like, as a 1/3, not great.
Yeah. I had very conflicting thoughts about that card, because it's a 1/3, so I actually saw it more as a defensive creature and maybe some kind of a control-ish kind of shell. But then on the other hand, it does have this battalion ability, so I don't understand how am I supposed to use this card.
I felt like, just looking at the attack with 3s in general, that it was like kind of a mechanic that was going to be hard to enable, just given the way that the format seemed like it would play out to me. Like, there's a green 3-mana 2/3 that puts a counter if you attack with 3, I think. But yeah, no, I was having trouble envisioning where the attack with 3 mechanic would really find a home as far as the different archetypes go.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. We have a question in the chat about the thinking cap.
Yeah.
That's the equipment that you can put on detectives.
I mean, I get where the question is coming from. You're playing flyers. You want to try and finish the game sooner, but it just feels like a way to get blown out. Yeah. I didn't put any in my deck.
You don't want to put the
do not
6-mana
like
guy
that
that brings them to the battlefield as well?
No, I think that card's even worse.
That's too much card advantage for me.
Because you
I
have
gotta
to
get
play
mine
the
incrementally.
thinking cap and the mana rock. No, I don't like
And
it.
not draw them.
And not draw them. That's the trick. That's the trick.
But
I mean,
if you have the mana rock, you can draw the other one.
Yeah, put it out a turn earlier. Yeah.
Exactly.
I like the attitude. It's like when you put young Red Dragon on an adventure to get a treasure,
and then you catch on a dragon with it.
Yeah.
Sounds legit. All right, let's go to Benji's Dimir. I mean, after I figure out how computer works, which
That's
might
fair.
take a decade or
So my main thought on Dimir is that you've got a lot of removal, and so what you need to kind of convert that into is like some card advantage. And I thought that the blue-black common disguise card was very strong. Like, it just like reads like an Augur of Bolus. It's like a
Fairy Scoop, you mean?
Yeah, it's like a 1/4 like flying like blocker. It just seems like a lot of material for the card, and I really like that card, and I felt like a lot of the blue and black cards kind of played into a shell that like kind of let that card shine a bit. So I mean, like, yeah, we've got the random surveil guy. I was like trying to go a little deep on gosh, I forget the name of it, but like the investigate like 6 or whatever of the 3-mana 2/2 flyers and such. And I thought it might be interesting to get some surveil in there. Like, I mean, again, hopefully my thought was that 2/1 might play better than you would think, because it would trade with some morphs and stuff.
Yeah, I think it looks reasonable.
Could be totally wrong there though. And then we've got my pet card, the Fester Leech, again, trying to self-mill. When I threw it in the deck, as I mentioned, I thought it was on attack, so it's not quite as good as I thought, but I still hope it could be a cool card in the format.
3/3 probably is a just good enough stat line for it, and the threat of activation is like a real thing.
Mm-hmm. So I don't know, like, I don't think the Leech necessarily plays super well with what this deck is trying to do, so it's probably a bit of an outlier here.
I'm a bit surprised that if you're planning to stack your graveyard so much, you don't play the return 2 creatures from the graveyard to the hand.
Oh, I might have completely missed that card. I feel like I only saw the Mind Rot. And
no, there's like a 4-mana card that you can return 2 creatures to your hand, and if something died this turn, you actually have it for 2 mana cheaper. Is that?
Oh, okay. No, I completely missed that card, and I think that, yeah, one of those would be a good fit in here for sure. Like, I have the uncommon blue-black card, which I thought would be, some good recursive value, but I totally agree that would be a great fit in this deck.
And then I guess the plan is to kill in the air as well.
I feel like that's kind of all of Blue's creatures almost. Like, it just had like some random 2/1s for 2 or like flyers, so I think with blue, I'm typically going to be trying to like stabilize the ground, kill in the air, but could be wrong.
And then we have the deuce. Okay, yeah, that makes sense. Extract confessions to exile stuff that you put in the graveyard. Eliminator is just good.
I'm hoping Eliminator is good. I read that card and I was like, oh, this is like, classic Boomer Magic.
This is classic Boomer Magic.
Yeah. I'm happy to play those 5 drops. I think it'll be just fine.
Yeah, I think
I'm excited for that. The Death Touch treachery or whatnot.
Yeah.
Persuasion.
I will say that there's probably a control deck that will learn how to play in blue-black because they have so many instants, so many things you can do, and just leave up all your mana and just do whatever you want. It just, we'll have to figure out what cards, like what the creatures need to look like, which morphs make sense, and which instants make sense. But
Cryptic Code, now that's the thing that I like.
Oh, the Cryptic Coat or whatnot. I'm very excited for that card. I think it might be underdrafted early because it's got a lot of words on it.
Card is
going to be
bomb.
Yeah. Okay.
That's good.
Yeah. 3/2 unblockable with massive upside.
Yeah,
it's not just a 3/2 unblockable. It's a 3/2 unblockable with 5 mega 2/2.
Yeah, exactly. Like, okay, I just consider that massive upside, but we could be more specific.
It's the type of card where you're like, you play it,
I think that's like almost the point of the card.
Yeah.
Oh,
the one card I'm a bit skeptical here is the Slice from the Shadows, because it's not a really efficient removal, and because of that, I'm thinking that this card is more like a combat trick, really, but in reverse. So I would maybe expect to have it in something that I want to push more damage on the ground than in the air.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense to me. I mean, I do have, things like Murder and such for like, unconditional removal.
That's good.
Like we were talking about the return 2 creatures that I forgot about. That could easily be, swapped out because I feel like this deck does have plenty of removal already.
Yeah. I don't mind the X spell. I don't think it'll be great, but when you're looking at something that'll scale up the game in a control deck, we're okay with paying a little bit, like 1 extra mana to kill their thing if it's something you couldn't otherwise kill, or just not fall behind early and take out a morph. Like, I don't think it's like you're not going to say, oh my goodness, my deck is a train wreck because I didn't get this Slice from the Shadows. But I think you'll probably be happy with one of them in a control deck.
No, I'm just going to be a bit more happy if I'm having like, the 4/4s, the 5/5s on the ground, and I can attack the double block or something with menace and stuff like that. Yeah. Okay. What other colors do we have here? I'm going to close some of the windows because I'm going to get confused with which to open.
I think we have red, black.
Rakdos?
Yeah. I can do mine. I feel okay with mine. It will probably be better than Rakdos of the last set. I feel like that's probably not hard.
Any hour now, and I will be able to open it. Oh, there we go. Mana value. Look at the overachiever putting lands in the deck.
I put lands in there, just to keep myself straight more than anything. But this is trying to lean somewhat into the suspect, but also I realize that I'm still suspect about that mechanic, so I want to have some other cards that just generate, game objects, pieces of cardboard, 2-for-1. So that's a lot of the gold cards plus the 5 drops that are kind of
I'm just picking up the suspect things.
Yeah, so I think 1 mana and 2 mana tricks will be really nice. So I'm excited to have a lot of those in both these colors. And I think just trying to get on the board early and forcing your opponent to try and respond to your threats. But if you're killing their stuff and giving your stuff menace, it's going to be tough for them to have 2 creatures on board to make good profitable blocks. And when they can, hopefully you can like blow out the blocks with like the toxin analysis or kill one of their creatures and just eat their other creature. And then I think, I like the tricks, make them block, and then just trade and make a 2/2.
Red Herring looks like a perfect vessel for smuggling a combat trick.
Oh, yeah. I will say it. If I were doing duplicates of commons, which I probably could have done for this one, this is probably the deck for multiple toxin analysis, because they're going to be forced to block your menace creatures, and then you just, take them both down, which will probably feel really good.
Yeah,
and then you leave along a token you can sack to this Crook or Eliminator or whatever to kind of get a Flame Tongue Kavu variant. So
I see that you also went quite deep on having those hybrid creatures.
Oh yeah, no, I think Fairy Snoop and Dogwalker are going to be very good cards, and then I think the Technician and the Orzhov one are probably like right behind it. So I'm happy to put those in there, and hopefully I can get an Escape Tunnel or two, and it won't be like a big deal to get the double mana colors for like a turn 4 flip. Yeah, I think those will be nice. Yeah. So nothing. I mean, it's nothing super crazy. You just try and curve out and kill their blockers, and just use Menace, and there you go.
I'm just looking at what can enable Galvanize, but
I don't care. I mean, it's great if I get it from Toxin Analysis, but yeah.
Yep. Oh, Jason said something, but I missed it.
Oh, I said 2 mana deal 3. That's what's going to enable Galvanize.
Yeah. I can live with that.
That sort of does the trick. Yeah.
Yeah, but I could definitely see like 2 if you're fortunate enough to get them like 2 Toxin Analysis, 2 Galvanize, and you're just going to the races with whatever creatures you want to have on board that hopefully have menace. Yeah.
So
that's just kind of a cheeky finisher. Like you've killed some things and you just play it, and it's probably a 6 mana win the game.
One would hope.
Yeah. At that point, yeah. But at least you have the buyout of like if you're on the draw, they're doing some offensive things. You can do the 2 mana, like kill something to maybe try and steal the tempo back a little bit. But yeah.
Okay. Yeah, that looks pretty sweet. Gruul. I have Gruul. I mean, because it's my turn, maybe. I don't even remember what I have in my Gruul. I guess I have Gruul cards in my Gruul. All right. So I guess that the base of the deck is the Nervous Gardener and the Tunnel Tipster, and then a bunch of things that I can play face down for the Tunnel Tipster to actually grow and become a threat as I continue my game, and using Tunnel Tipster to push more of those. Because I'm playing lots of face down cards, I want to play Fanatical Strength, so I can actually attack with my 2/2s, and then instead of flipping them, just making them 5/5 tramplers. And at the later game, I can have things like Thin Street Gossip together with the Tipster to be able to flip those super big things slightly earlier and get those 6/7s reach creatures going on, or the 3/2 Double Striker that also works well with the Fanatical Strength, and then a bunch of cheap removal, because since I'm playing more expensive stuff, I'm not worried about big creature. I'm worried about being overrun early, so I want to have those early shocks. Hard-hitting Questions, I think, is good because I can flip something big, cast Hard-hitting Question for 1 mana, and sort of get the big tempo swing. Obviously, I can put some Insane Bomb because I have 1 rare space, and I thought that actually the Yaris Roar of the Old Gods is better than the Mole in terms of what I'm planning to do with this deck. I do like the Loxodon Eavesdropper because look at how cute it is. Why wouldn't I play it? Another disguised creature, and I thought like this Rubble-Built Maverick is quite a decent creature to put in that deck, only for the Surveil 2, and then later in the game I can just put a +1/+1 counter on something because it's anyway in the graveyard. I don't have any other synergies with the graveyard, so I might as well.
I have a question for you. How do you feel about the card Dark Ritual? Would you like to put the card Dark Ritual in your deck?
Not great in limited.
Turn 1?
No, I probably wouldn't want to put the card Dark Ritual in my deck.
The more powerful my deck is, the more I like it.
Okay, I mean, yeah, okay. It depends on what format are we talking about.
Are we counting Storm?
What if the Dark Ritual is a split card with that also lets you save your creatures with removal?
Okay, what are we talking about now?
Now we're
talking about the card Expose the Culprit.
Oh, yeah. I was thinking about it, but I chickened out of putting it in. That's the card that can unflip something, and then also it can flip something back. And
yes, you can do both. Yeah, you could flip any number of things back, even.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I think that it's cute, and I could see playing it. I didn't put it in my simplistic version. I'd rather play the Fanatical Strength because they have utility when I'm unflipped completely. I think it works better for me. If I build a version that has like many more of those ETB effects when I unflip something, I would have been more likely to do it. In this version, I would probably consider playing off-color morphs more frequently with the Nervous Gardeners rather than the
another part of the Dark Ritual is like you said, the things that like do something when you flip them. So like for example, getting a land with Nervous Gardener, right? You get to Dark Ritual out like your 6/7, and also turn your Nervous Gardener back face down so that you can get another land, or like turn your Dog Walker face down, get 2 more 1/1s.
Zach in the chat asks, how does it save a creature from removal? It exiles it and then returns it unflipped. It doesn't just unflip it. It exiles and unflips, which means that the target disappears for the second there and reappears as a new card. So it does save from the removal. Like, this part is really good, saving stuff from removal. Even from... No, it won't save you from Wraths, would it? No. But I do like this card as a finisher. Sort of like the problem that those decks will have is I can play 6/7s and then it can be blocked indefinitely by a 1/1. That's why I like to have Fanatic Strength and this as a sort of like a massive version of the finisher. And also Greenbelt Radical. I'm not shy of reach in this deck.
Yeah. I just personally am very much a fan of the card Expose the Culprit right now for this kind of deck. I don't know if it'll actually be good, but I think you could make it good.
Yeah. Okay. Let's remove this shameful concoction from the site, and we have Selesnya. Oh yeah, we have to do cases. No, we have to do Jason cases.
I'm on the case.
Chase
Please,
is on the
anyone
case.
but me. Selesnya is a pile.
Oh, you didn't see mine. Okay. Wait a second. Let me enlarge this and maybe put those things closer so we can see everything.
Okay, so first off, this has 21 cards in it. I'm not saying you should play 20 lands. I'm saying that you'll put some random other cards.
It's an idea.
Like this isn't a full deck, whatever. But specifically, this deck, I wanted to call out that Case File Auditor is a strong Magic the Gathering card. If you have a lot of enchantments, and there are quite a lot of enchantments in this format. Specifically, you have at common Makeshift Binding and Dramatic Accusation as removal enchantments, which are both pretty decent. Makeshift Binding better than Accusation, but like Accusation also does the job. And if you're playing a 1/4 that finds you a removal spell, that's amazing. For 3 mana. Don't worry, I'll get to the nip of that. So ideally you want something like 7 or more enchantments, but luckily there's quite a lot of enchantments in the set. And also you ideally want a bunch of cases, because Case File Auditor does something when you specifically solve a case, which is it finds you yet another enchantment, which is really busted at that point. 3 mana 1/4 find 1 removal spell is great. 3 mana 1/4 find 2 cards is going to be insane, right? So things that you can play, there's the removal enchantments, there's the cases. So Buried in the Garden is one of the reasons why this is a natural fit for a green-white, because your green-white signpost involves an enchantment aura, and also green helps you cast multiple colors for all the different colors of enchantments you want, which will be very nice to have access to. But also, you have the card A Killer Among Us. Remember when I said that my method of solving the Case of the Shattered Pact was more sus? Well, that's why. This is why, because it's the Among Us enchantment. Notably, this is a 5 mana green enchantment that makes a white token, a blue token, and a red token. So that is 4 out of your 5 colors to solving your Case of the Shattered Pact, and all you need is some black permanent somewhere, something like Insidious Roots, perhaps. So that's one thing you can do here.
I mean, I love that card. I didn't realize that it makes 4 colors.
Yeah,
I love it more now.
Colors.
I love it more now.
Another multicolored enchantment is Chalk Outline, which for 4 mana, it's the one that says when a creature leaves your graveyard, you make a blue and white detective and you investigate. Notably, that's 3 colors: green, blue, and white. So lots of different colors among these enchantments, and you can play things like the flip cards, like Dog Walker or Rakish Scoundrel, in order to help make up some permanent colors as well. So this will probably be the deck that most wants Case of the Shattered Pact. Other decks probably won't be contesting you for that card because, like, come on, it's just not a very good card unless you can solve it. So I mentioned both Insidious Roots and Chalk. I think this is a good deck to try to put that kind of synergy in it as well, with things like Rebel Belt Maverick or the Sultai, like collecting evidence cards. And finally, the Niv-Mizzet here just represents just any rare, any colors of rares. It doesn't have to be Niv-Mizzet, right? Like, this is probably the deck for Niv-Mizzet because, like, you're going to be the easiest at casting it. It's going to help with your cases, but like it doesn't need to be Niv-Mizzet. It's just here to stand in for any, like, colorful rare that will improve your deck. Any bomb. And yeah, that's my case for the Case deck. Just that Case File Auditor is a very strong card. Case of the Shattered Pact and the Killer Abogus are a very potent combo together. And yeah, you can just make it work. It's powerful.
That looks pretty sweet. Just for the brewing aficionados, make sure you don't put Case of the Shattered Pact, Niv-Mizzet, and the Leyline in the same deck, because you might be disappointed that your Niv-Mizzet will not become will not get any bonuses because everything will be multicolored and not 2-colored. And also, Case of the Shattered Pact will not be able to target it, giving it double strike because it will be 5-color.
I think you'll be fine, though. I think that
that's really unfortunate.
If you've solved your case, I think you'll be fine.
I think you will be fine in the end. Yeah, in the end, you can always give the double.
You get to
strike
attack with your Case File Auditor for 2 in the air with Vigilance. So powerful.
Well, double strike, no?
Yeah. Case File Auditor 1/4, so it's a 2 in the air.
Oh yeah, 2 in the air. Yeah. Okay, yeah. All right, that looks pretty sweet. I don't think any one of us wants to share theirs then. Does anyone have a normal version of? Did anyone have a normal version of Selesnya? Like just trying to put lots of creatures and then put one big creature? No one is up for that kind of stuff.
I mean, I had morphs to try and use the other gold uncommon, but it pales in comparison to cases.deck. So,
all right, we have. I can try to do my Orzhov. Because I feel confident I was modestly okay with it. So when I figured out how it works. Is that the one? Yes, that's the one. So yeah, I mean, for Orzhov, I decided that the best plan for me would be to do a very grindy small creatures plus attrition. So we got Novice Inspectors for clue value and a small creature. Forum Familiar, I think that it's going to be much better than the dog was in LCI. You can play it as a morph, and you can flip it, and when you flip it, it gets +1/+1 counter. So it becomes the same 2/2 as that it was as a disguised creature, but you can bounce something back into your hand and recoup the ETB trigger. And yeah, again, Novice Inspectors has an ETB trigger. I have Unscrupulous Agent that exiles cards from opponent hand that has an ETB trigger. This one has, if something else ETBs, it gets a trigger. So if I buy something back, this also will get flying, which is great. We have the Sanguine Savior, that's 2/1 flying lifelinker. Insight Source, again, ETB trigger. I put as my rare, I put Delaney, the Streetwise Lookout, that doubles your ETB triggers from small creatures. So all of those things will get more ETBs. This thing drains when a small creature enters the battlefield, plus has some very, very high-costed ability that makes them technically unblockable and make you gain a lot of life. So all of those like small nickel and dime grindy stuff. And I think the problem with those kind of things is that opponent will start doing big things and you might run into troubles. For that, I have some good removal. I have a Makeshift Binding and Murder. But also, I think that this card can be pretty much playable in this type of deck, Cerebral Confiscation. It's for 3 mana, either Coercion or Mind Rot. You get to choose. So either you choose one card from opponent's hand and get rid of it, or you choose them to discard 2 cards. So in most situations, on turn 5 or something, if they have 2 cards in their hand, I want to get both of them. If they have 3 cards, I want to get one of them, and maybe get 2 of them and finish off with an Unscrupulous Agent. And the whole plan is that I'm playing small things. I'm getting those small things to make all the value, and at the same time, I'm attacking their hand actively, so they don't have anything. At some stage of the game, I can play things like Macabre Reconstruction. Also, I think pretty good removal for this particular deck is the Soul Enervation. That's 4 mana flash enchantment. It gives -4/-4 to target creature until end of turn. So it kills something medium-sized, but it leaves an enchantment behind, and that enchantment has whenever a creature I control leaves the graveyard, I basically drain an opponent for 1. So that adds to my plan of like nickel and diming them and getting those extra couple of points of damage. I can use the Macabre Reconstruction to take back my creatures from the graveyard. They leave the graveyard. I can do the Presumed Dead, which means that something goes into the graveyard and then gets returned to the battlefield and recoup the ETB trigger from it, so that also triggers it. And I have Call a Surprise Witness, which is the 2 mana reanimate a creature that costs 3 or less. So yeah, it's like all a sort of pretty synergistic package of this kind of small game attrition deck that sort of eventually wins just because you are left with more things on the board, because everything that you did was a sort of a 2-for-1 or 1.5-for-1. Clean magic.
Yeah, this reminds me of my deck a lot for Orzhov, actually. I also had like a Cerebral Confiscation, a couple of the Ravenous Rats, the agent of the format, and Presumed Dead. So yeah, I think that's definitely kind of what this archetype is trying to do, is just kind of grind on the small game and try to like, pinpoint a couple big threats with their, solid removal and just kind of take over from there.
All right. Any other thoughts on the black-white? Adam?
No, it just looks sweet. I'm excited to play this color pair. I think it'll be a very cool game.
Yeah, I wasn't before I started building it. And, I also can see, like, I tried to keep the off-color hybrids off my skeleton decks, but I totally see putting dogs into it. That will be playing fantastically with this plan, putting those 2/1/1s. And then, if I go this sort of like a go-wide version, you can play also the +2/+1 pump spell for the team.
I will be greedy about hybrids. I will take dogs or the 1/4 sleight of hand card higher than I should probably, and just force them in whatever I'm playing. And that'll be that.
Okay, we go with Is It? Who's got the better artifact deck? So there was Jason. Adam or Benji?
Not me.
I can put mine up there. That's okay. Fine.
I'm no good at it. That's always my worst color.
I don't know.
Yeah, mine probably has 15 to 18 cards that are similar to everybody else's. So, yeah.
Okay, that's the one.
I actually showed Restraint and didn't put a Dog Walker in this one.
Yeah. That's what you call Restraint.
Yeah. I still have the Fairy Snoop, of course, but
concerning.
Yeah. So obviously, people want to have the Dream Curve of Case of the Filch Falcon into the Gleaming Gear Drake. Is that what that name is? Yeah, and then just we're doing our best Mightstone animation plus a flyer impersonation there, which seems pretty good. But assuming you don't go turn 1, turn 2 into that, hopefully you can just make some artifacts, whether they're Thopters or clues, and find ways to leverage them, either just getting card advantage, turning them into threats that are going to like investigate with your 1-drop that you can flip over for disguise, the spy, or using your Filch Falcon case, or sacking them to your crooked whatever thing, or sacking them to your orangutan to make a 4/4 for 3. So you're trying to leverage these pieces of cardboard to be like useful, not necessarily just draw a card or be a 1/1 flyer, but.
By the way, I just realized, I mean, I'm going to attack into the orangutan with my flyer so many times in this format. So many times.
Yeah.
I can see that already.
Oh, it has reach. Yeah, no, you're just pointing that out to me.
Yeah. It's just swinging around in the trees, reaching up to get those Thopters.
Yeah, I do like both of the surveillance monsters.
Yeah.
I really think that those cards are...
I didn't realize the surveillance mentor was whenever you collect evidence. So I think there's definitely better decks for that card than this one, but even if it's just a 3/3 make a 1/1 flyer, like that's fine. But there will be decks that probably have green or black, multi-colors that you're making multiple 1/1 flyers, and that probably really pulls its weight there. But
this is the card that I really like in this set.
Yeah.
The Sudden Setback. That looks so good if you're playing this kind of a tempo-y game.
Yeah. I think so. Like, you have enough morphs to where you can hold mana up. You have enough instant speed stuff at the 2-drop for blue to where you can say, okay, I can crack a clue and play a 2-drop interaction spell or play my setback or whatever. So I think it'll play pretty well in this color pair and probably fine in like blue-black maybe as well. But this feels like a good color pair for it. Yeah.
Yeah. I think one card that I definitely was putting in my versions was the Suspicious Detonation.
Oh, yeah, I can see that. You're going to have enough clues. You can probably have that proc for a cheaper mana value. Yeah, that makes a ton of sense.
Yeah, because sometimes you will like sacrifice the red herring. Sometimes you will...
Yeah. I feel like it had a good interaction suite with the blue 2-drops plus some of the red stuff that I wouldn't necessarily need it. But yeah, I'm not going to kill an X4 variable at this deck. I'm just going to have to tap it down or bounce it, which is maybe not like a long-term answer. Yeah, I think that makes sense. I thought you were going to say the dragon is a good addition in this deck.
Dragon is I mean, I'm not saying it's not. I'm just like trying to keep it like realistic and It's more like I see that.
Yeah, it could fit well in this color pair.
Cards, but I think that Suspicious Detonation is going to be the card that is going to be most available from like decent removal because it's going to be so much better in Izzet than in any other version.
It's not quite a gold card because I think you could play it. Otherwise, there's enough clues in other colors, or just sometimes you need a deal 4. But yeah, this probably feels like its best home. But yeah, the hope is just play something on 2, play a Morphle on 3, flip it up and play a 2-mana interaction spell on 4, and then maybe play your Flametongue Kavu on 5, your Mana War on 6, and just curve out on them.
Oh, I see you managed to get the Hotshot Investigator.
Yeah, I think it'd be okay in here. I'm not over the moon excited about it. Yeah. I'm not over the moon about it, but I think it can be a good tempo piece when you have like
I think that's a good,
an aggressive enough
very good
deck.
Top end for this deck.
Yeah.
Although Detective Satchel, I don't know how good is that card going to be, but it looks pretty decent.
I'm willing to, if you can get the harried Dronesmith, then I'm willing to put the Satchel in there. If you can't, then it might hit the chopping block. Because it is kind of expensive, and
I mean, it does make a lot of cardboard.
Yeah,
anyway,
it does.
And it draws cards eventually, and then it makes some Thopters. I mean, I think it's like...
I will say, for a color pair that's wanting to hold up mana, I mean, these are probably 2 of the main colors for that, so you're probably fine having clues that you crack if you don't bounce their creature, or counter their spell, or play a burn spell or something. So this could be like a good color pair for it.
Also, like Faithlight on the Orangutan early might be quite...
I do think... I don't know what people... I mean... I think Faithlight is going to be a card that I am very happy to play, and I'm very happy to play it, very unhappy to play against, which makes me think it's going to be like play up in like a good player's hands, like fizzle your removal spell and give myself a threat that might not have otherwise been a threat.
Are you trying to tell me that I should avoid it?
Yeah, just pass it right along to me. It's all good. Yeah. I don't think it's going to be a bomb or anything, but I think it'll be a very nice card that'll be annoying to play against. And you're going to say like 2 mana up, they do that, the balance for the counter, and they do the Faithlight, and you're like, oh, that wasn't good for me.
Yeah, I love the dismissed way spy with a bunch of doctors as well. That's
yeah. If you can get 2 or 3 tokens off of that, I mean, you're set for the next like 3 turns. Just fit that 2 mana in where you can. Yeah. So I think this will be a fun pair to play.
Actually pretty sweet, I think. But I think it's also like it's probably one of the better archetypes in the format. I guess it's just like aggressive, and there is not like you don't try to do anything too cute. You have synergies, but they sort of naturally come together, which is fine.
Yeah, I will say I think there's 2 reach creatures of common, and the orangutan is far and away the better one. So I think if you can make this a 4/4 reach, like, yeah, it's great to have attacks, but if you're just like every other deck we've been talking about is trying to fly over, like, what are you going to do?
And it will sometimes just snap something really powerful.
Yeah.
Okay, we move to the Golgari. Who is happy to... Jason, are we going for your slimes?
Right, I made that deck. To be clear, it's a joke deck. We can put it. We should put it up. We should put it up. But like, it's not serious. It's not a serious deck.
What do you mean? We treat skeletons super seriously. That's all.
Yeah. Oh yeah. No. Like, I would have built the slime deck, except you could only put 2.
This can't be a skeleton because slimes don't have skeletons. Anyways.
Yeah.
So
and skeletons only have 2 commons.
So as it turns out, Slime Against Humanity is a card that exists. It is not a very good card that exists. But if you had to enable it, you would probably want to be playing a lot of like self-mill cards so that you don't have so that your first one is a 3/3, right? You don't want your first one to be a 2/2. So things like Fester Leech, things like Rumblebelt Maverick work well, and then Toxin Analysis works well with both Fester Leech and Rumblebelt Maverick, and also the slimes themselves because the slimes have Death Touch. Insidious Roots works well with all of this because you're filling your graveyard and it lets your slimes tap for mana, which could be relevant. Like, you could go turn 2 Roots into turn 3 Slime into turn 4 Slime, right? Or no, not quite. You turn 5 Slime.
The only thing is that you don't get anything from exiling the slimes from your graveyard.
Yeah, exiling the slime through a graveyard does not trigger Insidious Roots. So this is probably kind of questionable.
I tried to make the Roots slime deck, but then I came up to the idea that I want only creatures in the Roots deck.
Yeah, it's tough. It certainly is rough. Playing Polygraph Orb here so that we can fill our graveyard with more slimes. And we can slime all over our opponents.
More good.
And wish that we had the card Slogurk, the over slime, but that's fine.
Slime Lord.
Yeah, this is not a good deck. Do not do this. Do not try this at home.
Wait, so Slime Against Humanity is not Serpentine Curve?
No, it's not.
Okay, all right.
I mean, good part of the slime of the Serpentine Curve was that you only needed to play 1 or 2 of those, and you needed only to have 1 or 2 of those, because the rest of the stuff was fueling them, and slimes unfortunately have to fuel themselves.
Okay.
I still would probably recommend you to draft. Yeah, I still probably recommend you to draft slimes in paper very highly because they will be like $2 cards probably. As everything that you can
the
have.
Dragon's Approach effect.
Per pod?
That is a good question. Yeah, Clarm's asking about number. Yeah.
Okay, let's see. So in total,
2.4.
Okay. There are 81 commons. So your claim is that 81 times 2.4. Your claim is that there's like about 200 commons in this set, or like 200 commons in the draft. Is that true?
Yeah, probably. Because it's like just over 8 per pack, is it?
How many times do we have?
My claim is that change of the booster did not change the frequency of a common per pod because they reduced the number of commons in the set while reducing the number of commons per booster. And I assume that it's more or less equivalent, which would mean that it's always been 2.4 per pod.
Sounds pretty reasonable to me.
Yeah,
because there were 100 commons.
There could be more. There could be less.
So just
I did a
speculate on
practice
slimes.
recently where there were at least 5, maybe 6 copies in the draft. very slimy draft.
Yeah, you need to have the right pod for the slime shenanigans.
Yeah, if you're on Draftmancer, don't turn on duplicates just to give us a chance for this. Yeah.
I
Don't do this.
might do my Sultai because I only me and Adam have Sultai, and then we can choose from.
Yeah, I definitely, I was playing by the rules. No,
Not Sultai, Simic. That's what I meant. Simic.
Oh yeah, no, I didn't have any Simic because I always struggle with Simic.
Technically, I think that there might be a Simic deck in this set.
I believe it. There's typically a Simic deck. I just don't find it in week 0.
No, I mean there is typically a
learned.
Simic deck. It's just like it has 47% win rate, but I'm talking like it might be actually not terrible. Right. I mean, the package Nervous Gardener and Tunnel Tipster. You can see the trend that I'm having there. I do like, I think, the combination of those two cards generally because I think it's a good curve out. Tipster into Gardener works fine because the Tipster becomes bigger. Plus the Fairy Snoops because I think that you can flip them quite easily. And you have Gardeners, you can put like a Swamp just to have an extra resilience to it. I put Evidence Examiner, and I don't know why I put it, but I think that occasionally you will be able to exile something from your graveyard because you don't have much use for it, and then get a clue and use your graveyard as a source of future cards.
Yeah. You have Surveillance Monitor. I think that's why you did the Examiner. Yeah.
I have Surveillance Monitor. Yeah,
it's good to me, right? Like, if you think about it, Evidence Examiner is kind of just a 2/2 that like immediately investigates and probably investigates like 1 or 2 more times. That's like really strong. That's really strong as on ring.
Yeah, I like the Examiner.
Yeah, it's going to have to get killed, right? I mean, you have to point a removal spell at it.
Put Elephants because I like them. I just like the picture of it. I mean, what can I say? That's the thing. I think it's a decent creature. Like it's a much worse version of Sarul's Packmate. But it gives the vibe, like a 3/3 that draws half a card. It's not terrible, and it can become a 4/4 sometimes out of nowhere.
Yeah, I thought it looked fine. Like, not great by any means, but solid role player.
Yeah, this is what green gets for card advantage, so we'll just take it and be happy.
I put some of the bigger disguise creature. I as I said before, I think that the Crocodile is actually pretty good curve out with the Tunnel Tipster. You play the Tipster, you play the Undercover Crocodile on turn 3, and on turn 4 you can attack and then flip it, and you have a 5/5 that investigates. Or if they block, you have a 5/5 that eats something, most likely. Because I'm playing this kind of a game when I have slightly bigger things, I have a couple of the unauthorized exits, out colds, and this basically like tempo package in the green deck. I think this card is like super good, Repulsive Mutation, because a lot of the times it's just 2 mana counter spell, which is ridiculous. And in the late game, it's even better. So I don't see a downside of that card in most of the games if I'm playing the tempo game when I want to be slightly untapped on occasions as well. And hard-hitting questions to kill the 6/6 dragon on occasions. Reasonable Doubt to counter the 6/6 dragon, and Fanatical Strength to give me some reach in terms of like pushing those last pieces of damage. And as my rare, I chose Vanifar because it has some fun things.
So if I had to point out one downside of the blue-green counterspell, it's that it doesn't do anything on turn 2 on the draw.
Yeah, that's fine. I have stuff.
Yeah.
I mean, I do know that. I do know that part. Yeah, I do know that part.
Okay. That's why the 1 point where I was just
that's why you played the Rubble Master. You're absolutely right. Oh, that would be so sick. But also, I don't think that there is many things that in this format that they play on turn 2 that I'm like have to counter. Unless it's the enchantment in the black-green and they have like a super streamlined deck for that. But apart from that, I think that I want to keep it to counter their 5-drops or something. Yeah. I mean,
I like it. It looks good. You can do stuff at instant speed. You can apply pressure. You can.
I think the biggest problem that this deck might have is pushing damage, but that's why I think that this tempo package is so extensive. And it's not like I'm not trying to push the super early damage. I'm trying to play those things like turn 6, 7, the outcolds, and then when I already have like a bigger creature board and selectively pick things that I can tap without being like worried that someone is going to counter it, because you can't counter it. So I can actually, that's another knock against the reasonable doubt, that there's several spells in this format that just don't care about counter spells at all. I think most spells that cannot be countered since, I don't know.
Yeah, that's a great point, actually. I hadn't thought about that when I was putting the reasonable doubt in a couple decks, but a lot of the removal just says cannot be countered.
Yeah, I'd feel better playing it if we had like blood rather than investigate, so you could just loot it away. But yeah, it's good on turn 2 to snipe and morph, I guess, but it's tough otherwise.
All right, that covers my Simic. But I think that maybe for the first time in I don't know how many sets, we're going to have actually a blue-green deck that is playable, because I think some of those multicolor things are pretty decent, and you can put things like a Fairy Snoop into it easily and not be ashamed of it.
Yeah, I don't think we built multicolor blue-green, but it's probably another deck where you could say, I can splish splash around, I can get some powerful stuff in there. I have blue interaction to keep me alive.
I said Sultai by accident, but it's actually not a completely unreasonable choice, because the synergies overlap as well.
Yep. Yeah, right. You've got the green morph play of the land.
Adam, do you want to go through your Boros?
Sure. Yeah, I'll do Boros, yeah. It's not going to be... I mean,
you could build this deck just out of commons.
Yeah. No, I definitely
really
agree.
I'm already seeing like a bunch of hybrid things.
Of course, yeah. But this is but these hybrids are like good cards, yeah. Probably. But yeah, I agree. This is probably the deck that can come together best at common, because there's a ton of red and white interaction, and there's a ton of like good 1 and 2 drops in these colors, which is there's kind of a dearth of those in some of the other colors comparatively. So this one, especially if you're on the play, can kind of set the pace for the game, and then should have enough evasive creatures to kind of get over the finish line.
You put the Scooby Snacks.
Oh yeah. I think that'll be a nice little. It's not quite Furnished Rider in a way that you can't give something else haste, but I think it'll be a nice creature to give yourself a little resiliency. Like you put it down, you swing in, you have a clue to use next turn to maybe find your next action, your interaction spell, or something else. But yeah, I mean, the hope or goal is just play threats and just back them up with interaction, which I think is pretty good in both these colors. Like the 1 mana, 2 mana combat tricks, like the Felonious Rage and the Auspicious Arrival. I think both those will just be good cards in general, but particularly in a deck like this where you're really forcing your opponent to like make blocks that they may be kind of questionable on. And still gives you a chance to double spell, whether it's like flipping over your morph plus playing your trick, or like playing another creature plus playing your trick. I think I like those, and a lot of the expensive spells are morphs. You can get them down early, and you just kind of have a density of things you can play on 2 and 3. So I think this is a deck that has a lot of interchangeable pieces. Like you could put in many other types of like morphs or 2-drops, but I like the 2 white 2-drops that we have a lot, like the Market Watch Phantom and the Neighborhood Guardian. I think both those will play very well in these decks. So it'll pump up your creatures to give them attacks, and give flying to your Phantom to give it attacks to continue pushing damage. So I think those are just really at home in this deck. And number dog walkers.
The Pegasus is going to be such a good addition to any of those decks. I didn't put it in my skeleton into a black-white, but I think it would fit there perfectly. Also.
Yeah. I agree. Yeah, I mean, if you can get a couple dog walkers as well to just make the Guardian pump up 3 creatures two creatures, I guess, because you're flipping it over. Especially at instant speed can be really nice. So yeah, I think it's just a lot of trying to use your mana every turn as efficiently as you can, and just not giving your opponent a chance to breathe. So hopefully this deck isn't as good as I think it could be, because it might be like the fun police of the format. But if it's not, then I mean, that's kind of encouraging. I hope this isn't as good as it kind of looks.
Yeah, I notably you didn't put the +2/+1 to the team card.
Oh, that was just an oversight. That should have been in there. I know I have the split card that kind of does that. But yeah, I think I probably should have made room for the +2/+1. I think I probably just didn't go back and put that in there, because that would make a ton of sense. You could probably even have both because I mean they're similar enough, but you can have the buyout clause of getting 3 flyers. Yeah, you just put that on.
This card I completely missed on that little ability of making 2 dogs.
Oh yeah.
So
No,
much better
this one
now.
will be great. You're like, just put it on creatures, and then when you run out of creatures, you make some 1/1s. Yeah, or you turn into 1/1s if you're going to do like a +2/+1 or +1/+1 and counters type of thing. Yeah, I think that will play very well in the white leaning aggro decks, which I think is going to be probably almost the vast majority of white decks, like probably 90+% of them.
Yeah, white looks pretty lit in terms of like creature quality.
Yeah,
it reminds again of the concept of Arkir, where white was the fun police sort of.
Yeah. We'll see what happens in this set. It looks pretty good, just because the format maybe is like a tick slower than normal, but white might maybe still like good enough compared to normal pace. So we'll see.
All right. Anyone else wants to show their Boros concoction? Benji?
Boros is just Boros.
Yeah,
I mean,
aggro on aggro.
Look at mine, but I think I forgot the gold cards, and it's just a pile of red-white commons. It looks very similar to Adam's. I think that it's just gonna be like 1-drop, 2-drop. I also didn't realize that equipment makes 2 dogs or whatnot. Like
oh yeah.
So that's something that I definitely missed out on. But yeah, I think that there's the 2 common red removal spells just pair really well with the white aggressive common creatures. Both the Thraben Inspector and the 2/2s with evasion, and the 3 mana, like it's a 2/2 and a 1/1. It kind of reminds you of like the Kaladesh Remastered, like improvised guy, Argivian Cavalier, like etc. Like there's a million versions of the 3 mana 2/2 and a 1/1. And I don't really have too much to say about it other than I'll probably draft a lot of it early on until other people do.
Any other, because we went through all the 10 color pairs, any other, do you want to come back to any of your decks that we didn't talk about, especially you, Benji, because I think you had fewer than the rest?
I mean, we looked at my Dimir, which I was like kind of excited about. I guess we didn't like, I don't know, in Gruul, do you think that the red mana, the 1-drop 1/2 that like allows your morphs to be cheaper, do you think that card's playable? Like that was something that like I put one of in my Gruul deck, and like I was kind of curious about like that kind of like the 1/2 with like the morphs and just the big creatures, but I don't really think it gets there. So I'm not like super keen on it.
I'm a bit split. I think that if you have like 3 tunnel tipsters in your deck, I think that it might be a thing when you on turn 3 you swing with the Mask Maker and you play 2 morphs on turn 3, and that might be actually a good thing to do, because then you are way ahead on board. You have options to attack with both of the morphs and actually have a reasonable chance of flipping them on turn 5. So whichever gets blocked can be flipped, whichever doesn't, it stays at 2/2. So I think that in a deck like that, it might be playable.
Yeah, best of 3 maybe. Like, you're on the play, you might put it in, but there's not like great sack outlet, so I'm a little hesitant about putting that card in there.
Yeah. If it's not,
combat tricks will make it better. I think if you get
that's
a
true.
bunch of the +3/+3s, then they attack.
Yeah, turn them all sideways and eat something.
And Demon Child, thanks for the sub. Important.
Okay. I don't know. Like my Rakdos deck is like kind of erring on the side of mono red. It might be interesting, but that's about the only thing.
Okay, well let's go with your Rakdos, because we didn't talk much about Rakdos actually.
Sure. Yeah, we could take a look, because I thought that like if Rakdos is kind of underdrafted, you can probably get a lot of the gold cards late, and then like the mono red package per se of like 14 to 16 red cards, some gold cards, and a few like black removal could kind of be interesting. And this was one that I thought was, it might be able to, have some legs or be just a little more interesting than some of the other decks. I kind of like the idea of like the more flyer as like a closer. And it seems like there were a lot of like random red and Rakdos-y kind of like 2-drop rares and stuff that like if the people next to you aren't, red or something, you could get a fair amount of them, and they're kind of powerful. But I thought that, that's the other thing, is the alley assailant or whatnot kind of gives a good amount of reach actually with that morph ability. The double black is kind of hard. And I guess morph is disguise. My bad.
Yeah,
But,
well, we decided we're going to use the term more for the disguised creatures, and we're sticking to that.
And so
yeah,
here
you
kind
get
of
some
again
like
see
really
the
solid black and
matchmakers.
red removal as well. Like that, if Rakdos is open on the table, you will be able to get those deadly complications, and the blood spatter analysis is rare, so maybe not so frequently. But deadly complication, you probably will be able to get two if no one is drafting Rakdos in your pod.
And yeah, I think the idea of the Felonious Rage and Red Herring together work really well because you can kind of get a lot of good blocks that are kind of favorable for you. You can cash in the Red Herring if need be. And so I thought that, yeah, this was another interesting kind of style of deck where the Alley Assailants kind of played well with the red cards. But I'm not too sure if it'll pan out this way. Time will tell.
Yeah, Rakdos sort of looks like a good removal combination, and let's hope for the best kind of. But I think it will be way better than in the LCI at least. So that's optimistic.
Yeah,
So
we can
bad.
only hope.
At least they don't have a single creature that gets a +1/+1 counter at the end of your turn if something went into graveyard, which is a good sign.
Yeah.
Because that design should be permanently like removed or changed in a way that makes it playable. Because never was playable. It was always
it's always so bad.
Okay, well, we are done with the stuff. Do we want to do a sim draft with 4 pilots?
I am definitely out. I should go do some other stuff, but this was great as always.
As always. Okay, so let's do the finishing of the podcast version, and then we can move to the bonus draft sim draft.
That sounds good.
Right. So
sounds good
thanks
to me.
everyone.
I've got like 20 more minutes.
Yeah.
Thanks everyone for listening, and it's been a pleasure. Any of you guys have anything to plug for the recent days and for your content? I know that Jason has an amazing website, so maybe you can do the little plug for that.
Yeah, I write articles at experimentalsynthesizer.blog. It's a bit of a mouthful, sorry.
I'm going to put it in the description, so don't worry about it. I'm going to put the link to the description.
Great. I write weekly articles there, and yeah, you can catch those. I have some constructed with like Slogurk stuff, and mostly limited. And I'm currently writing some Murders at Karlov Manor articles as I prep for the Pro Tour as well. So yeah, that should be exciting.
There we go, Benji.
Nothing too much to plug. I'm out on like Twitter and Discord here and there, posting various things that come across my mind or that I've been playing a lot of. But yeah.
You're part of the Draft Lab, aren't you?
Yes, absolutely. We've got a Discord and yeah, talking draft and stuff. Excited for this set because I was not a big LCI fan. So excited to play a bunch of murders.
Adam, any tips on plastering?
Just find a good crew and let them do what they need to do. Yeah,
hire a professional.
Yeah, I would recommend that. Yeah, no, nothing super crazy to plug. I mean, I'll be on Twitch doing some stuff, always doing team drafts. If you're interested, just ping me and we'll set you up with that. And yeah, it looks like a fun set. I enjoyed most of the sets from last year, and I think this one will probably be as good or better than the median set from 2023. So I'm excited for it.
And yeah, I don't have anything to plug except for thanking my sponsors in mtgazone.com. I put an article about the removal of the set today, so just go and check it out. And thanks to my patrons for supporting the stream. So with that, I'll see you next week when we're going to be diving into some other primers for the set because I don't think we're going to have data just yet. But see you next week.